Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel. I declare the meeting open at 9:32 a.m. and I acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the DAP Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the DAP Regulations. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before. To take the opportunity to introduce the members that will be participating today. My name is Dale Page. I'm the presiding member today. To my left in the room with me, I have Francesca Lafanti, Deputy Presiding Member, and Clayton Hyam, Specialist Member. Online with us for the City of Vincent item, we have Councillor Nicole Wolfe and Councillor Alex Castle. Welcome to you both. And in the room with us as well for Part C of the agenda, Melville, we have Councillor Glynis Barber and Councillor welcome. Item 2, apologies. We have no apologies today. Item 3, noting of minutes. Minutes of all previous meetings are available on the website. Part B of our agenda, City of Vincent. Item 1 is declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and the Part B related information. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have considered all information? Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Could I check with the local government DAP members whether this application has been before you at a council briefing or a meeting? No? Excellent. Thank you very much. No other disclosures or no disclosures of interest have been received to this point. Do any members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to this item? All right, moving on then to item 3, which is our Form 1 DAP application for Vincent today. Number 256 and 258, lots 800 and 801 Charles Street, Perth, multiple dwelling development DAP number 25/02981. We have one presenter on this item today, Peter Mercer from Urbanista, speaking in support of the application. Peter, you know the drill. In accordance with our standing orders, your presentation is limited to 3 minutes. We've read what you've provided, so I encourage you to stick to the points you'd like to get across within that time frame. And then I will call you to time when you reach time, and members will be able to ask you questions if they have any. Your time starts when you are ready.
Thank you. So good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today in support of development, the development application for 256 and 258 Charles Street, North Perth. With me are Abel Ling from Abel Ling Architects and John Woon from DevelopWise. We're happy to take on any questions at the conclusion of my presentation. Before I move on, I'd like to thank the City of Vincent for their support for the application and recommendation of approval. We've worked hard with them over the last 6 months to achieve this recommendation and have presented sets of amended plans, presented to the DRP, and really tried our best to address the concerns of the neighbours to the south to have a positive recommendation. So thank you to the city's officer. With respect to the development site, the city's local planning scheme has a provision which sites that are over 2,000 square metres are able to be, the zoning is split on the site. So residential R60 and R100, and the higher density is achieved for sites that are over 2,000 square metres, which these two lots combined achieve. So that allows us the opportunity to build to 4 stories. We haven't done that here. We're at 3 stories. So the development is actually at a smaller footprint than or scale than we have potential for. So at 3 stories, the development achieves the desired outcomes of providing housing consistent with the high density code without dominating neighbouring properties, which are currently 1 to 2 stories nearby, but also there's a development that's 4 stories across the road. So a total of 29 multiple dwellings are proposed, which include a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bed units. Parking for residents is compliant with 39 vehicles provided in the basement. One visitor bay is there's a variation. However, given the site's access to public transport, especially the high frequency bus route along Charles Street, we believe that the one visitor bay shortfall can be supported, and so did the city. Concerns raised during community consultation were presented by the city, and the design was amended with a focus on improving areas of non-compliance, protecting properties to the south. The amended plans propose greater building separation, increased setbacks, additional screening to address visual privacy, and an updated landscaping plan to provide more canopy cover and a bit of a buffer. But I'll just point out that some of those properties to the south are actually 7 to 9 metres away from our development, in addition to the setback that we provide. So there is quite a separation between our properties and our neighbouring properties. The plans were referred back to the DRP for a 3rd time, and we improved on some of the scores that we had previously. So we pretty much have the support of the DRP.
You're at time, Peter, so I'll ask you to
just finishing up. So the conditions of approval are acceptable. There was one in relation to condition number 12, which talks about the need to provide a closed drying facility and then a screen from public ground. We'll have dryers in these apartments. So whether there's a need for that condition or not, it could just be deleted. In summary, the proposal is consistent with the state and local planning framework, delivering a built form outcome which is appropriate to the residential R100 density of the site. The development will importantly help to address the state's current housing crisis by providing 29 new apartments in a suitable location, close to amenities and public transport services. Respectfully, we ask for your support.
Thank you. All right. Are there any questions of this presenter? Councillor Wolf, do you have any questions of the presenter? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Peter, for the presentation. I did just have one question, please, which related to the shortfall of the visitor bay. I'm just wondering, given we've got the surplus of residential bays, why the development then isn't able to meet the minimum requirement for visitor bays, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a good question. It's simply that we've allocated the bays that are outside of the gate for visitor parking, and I guess the other bays just are allocated to the apartments. So we do feel, I mean, this is an excellent spot in terms of the public transport. So we do not feel that the one bay shortfall will pose a problem. And that sort of additional bay just goes back into basically servicing the actual apartment complex. So it's just a matter of, so it's a design thing, but also the fact that sort of literally step outside on Charles Street, you've got buses that fly by every 5 minutes, excellent bicycle pathways in the city of Vincent, as well as you can pretty much walk from the site to parks and everything else. So the one bay shortfall, we felt that was acceptable in circumstances.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf, any further questions? Councillor Castle, any questions from you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just have a question about the overshadowing of the property to the south that's at 100% at the relevant time. Just wondering if you could give some explanation about why that couldn't be reduced or avoided.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I might sort of start my response and able to perhaps jump in, but it's almost impossible to avoid overshadowing that property. We've looked at schemes, I think, where it's a single story development and you still overshadow that property. Unfortunately, that property is just in a really difficult position with the density that's allowed on this site, whether it's R60 or R100. Whatever you basically build on our site, it overshadows that property. And there's nothing that we could really do to try and to address the overshadowing on the property. Pretty much just shadow falls on it at that point in the year, 100%. So what we have tried to do is through the change that we've made is actually to limit the amount of overshadowing that occurs on the other property. So we've been able to do that, and we've provided plans. It's in the actual agenda. We show layers of different times of the year, the previous plans, current plans, and also we've overlaid that onto what we could actually do in terms of the height. We could actually build up to 4 stories and the impact that would have. So we've also tried with the design. You'll see there's a driveway adjacent to those neighbours. We've got separation there. We've really tried to sort of limit the impact on those neighbours. We knew from the get-go that I guess the impacts would be to those south-facing neighbours. So unfortunately, that property itself is just it's a really difficult one. It's almost unavoidable. I'm not sure if you want to jump in over.
Well, we actually provided enough setback, which is 4.5 from R60's residential code. Just unfortunately, this lot is really small. From the survey plan, it's about 160 square only on that block. And also, we have reduced the story. Instead of 4-story, we go down to 3-story. So that's really helped. And we also do a lot of studies on how to achieve that. Yeah, really speaking, to achieve 50% on that lot, the half of the frontage of the building has to be chopped off. So that's why I think that this is probably not really wise in terms of the streetscape. So that's why we think that the current proposal is probably adequate in viewing appropriate setback, and also the lower story, which is 3-story.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Castle? No? Members in the room? Hi.
Thank you. Just going back to the surplus parking, how will that be allocated? And once it's allocated, can I presume that the owner of the unit will also own the parking bay or bays?
John, would you like to maybe comment on how you plan on allocating the parking? Or, I would imagine that the 3-bedroom apartments will get the additional parking bays, but John might have
all 1-bedrooms get 1 car bay, and then the 2 3-bedrooms get 2 car bays, and the remaining extra bays would go to a 2-bedroom. So some of them will get two car bays for the 2 bedrooms.
I ask that because the RAR suggests in one part that if later on we find that there's not enough visitor parking, we could reallocate those surplus bays. And I wouldn't have thought that was possible if they own or lease those bays.
Well, that would be right, because they would be rather titled to the actual apartment.
Further? No. Can I just clarify, the visitor bays, are they proposed to be located behind the roller door, in front of the roller door?
front of the rear roller doors.
I read the plans, it looked like they were.
Rear roller doors, well though? So there's a roller door at the front, and then there's, I think, another one.
There's a fire
Fire door, okay.
Okay. So if there's a roller door and the visitor bays are located behind that, how do you envisage that access to those bays will be managed?
You'd be part of the management plan. I guess that would buzz up and contact someone. So there would be a management plan, an operational plan in place where visitors, perhaps even the gate would remain open during the day and close at night. There might be sort of there's ways of dealing with that, probably no different to any other development where that occurs. For security purposes, you probably want to have that gate locked at night, and then during the day, an opportunity there to keep that open, perhaps. But I think there is sufficient parking within this site. We don't anticipate that they'll all be used this space. Or the people that will rent the apartments will probably walk or catch buses and trains. So there is that flexibility, Clayton, in terms of how these spaces are used. But essentially, there is the ability to shut that roller door, people buzz up, or for it to be open and worked into a management plan, perhaps with the city.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are fortunate to have Callum Radecki and Michael Hancock with us today from the City of Vincent. Do you have anything you specifically wish to address in response to the deputation? I'm not asking you to make a presentation, we don't have time for that, but if there's anything that popped up in the deputation you would like to address, or are you happy to go to questions?
I wouldn't want to preempt the questions of the panel. However, I would be happy to talk to.
Sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
Oh, sure. I wouldn't like to preempt the questions of the panel. However, I would like the opportunity to address the questions regarding condition 12.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, from the city's perspective, whilst there may be briars provided in each of the units, the city considers it important to provide alternatives to just using dryers, not just from a, I guess, an impact on residents and their decisions to close horse out on the balcony or use the dryer, but also from a energy and sustainability perspective that, you know, Perth is a very warm city. Having the ability to dry washing naturally is obviously much better for the environment for your sort of water markets across various developments, you know, just in the city of Greater Perth. So the volume 2 of the article is quite clear on providing clothesline facilities in the acceptable outcomes. So this will just give the city the confidence that that's provided, but also retains the visual amenity to the site from the street and from the neighbours.
For that. We'll move to questions of the officers. Councillor Wolf, any questions for the officers?
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping the city could please just briefly provide some comment around the 2 issues that we discussed following the presentation. So regarding the shortfall of the visitor bay, as well as the 100% overshadowing issue relating to the adjoining property to the south, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. So I'll start with the visitor parking. So I would echo the comments made by the applicant, Mr. Merger. The city obviously has undertaken an assessment on the car parking and determined that there is a 1 bay visitor shortfall. The number of dwellings in the complex just pushes it above that threshold to the next level of being required. So although there is a shortfall, it's sort of on the lower end of the demand spectrum for that additional bay. We note that there is a surplus of residential bays in the facility, and we have made comments that those could be reallocated in the event it was considered necessary. We also recognise that once a built strata has occurred, that opportunity has been missed, but it's not uncommon for developments through the construction phase and the building permit phase to slightly make minor modifications, and there is the opportunity for one of those residential bays to be allocated as visitor, but that is a decision of the applicant should they choose to make it. Our assessment of the acceptability of that 1 bay shortfall really derived from the location of the property within those excellent transport connections, excellent pedestrian infrastructure, and the ability to accommodate really quite a minor shortfall. The application is not seeking departures for the bicycle parking for residents and visitors, nor for car parking for residents themselves. Obviously, as we discussed, there's a surplus. So from the city's perspective, in our assessment, we considered the 1 bay shortfall to be sufficient or suitable. In regard to the overshadowing, this was probably the primary focus of our assessment, and we obviously spent a lot of time working with the applicant, who did provide us with a lot of information, a lot of technical information around the impact of that overshadowing to that southern property that is 100% overshadowed at the solstice. The acceptable outcomes and the development objectives talk about minimising the impact of overshadowing to affected sites. So unfortunately, this particular configuration, south orientation, the subject site, the impact to the south, is the southern property is quite a small property. It's less than 200 square metres. So as a percentage, it's quite easy for any development on the subject site to represent a shadow that is greater than what's permitted. What we tried to work with the applicant was to minimise the impact of that shadowing throughout the year. So the applicant looked to make amendments to the proposed plans to include setbacks, and demonstrated where that shadow will fall throughout the year. So we were trying to focus on the retention of light to the solar collectors, also to try and provide as much light to those upper floor habitable room windows. The overshadowing diagrams that were provided to us throughout the year demonstrated that although there is an overshadowing impact, throughout the year it's much less pronounced to those more sensitive areas of habitable rooms and the solar collectors than what it appears from a purely assessment perspective on the winter solstice.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf, does that answer your questions?
It does. Thank you, Chair. No further questions from me. Thank you.
Councillor Castle, any questions of the officers?
Thank you. I have a follow-up question about the overshadowing. I'm just seeking clarification from the city. Do you agree with the applicant's assessment that it would be almost impossible to design a property on this site that didn't have a significant amount of overshadowing for the property to the south? That's my first question.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Castle. Obviously, I want to preface this with the fact that I'm not a designer and we're here to assess the application that is in front of us. We had productive and ongoing conversations with the applicant around looking at ways of mitigating the overshadowing. Is it possible to design a building that would be meet the acceptable outcomes of the Volume 2 R codes? Possibly, but we obviously haven't run that scenario. We haven't designed that building ourselves, but we're here to assess what's put forward to us and try and get the best outcome and satisfaction of the element objectives. So whilst it might be possible, that's not what we have considered.
Thank you. You also mentioned in the RAR and the additional information that some rezoning of that property may resolve some of that issue. I'm just wondering, I just want to check that I have understood that correctly.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. I'm just going to confer with my colleague and I'll in just a moment. Castle, can I please ask which section of the report you're referring to, just so I can make sure I'm answering the question?
Sure. In the related information at page 2 of where the summary of submissions is set out, in the overshadowing it says, with respect to the adjoining R40 coded lots, although it goes beyond the determination of this application, it makes sense to reconsider their current density and to apply a coding that achieves a more appropriate built form transition from Charles Street to Alma Road.
Well, and sorry, was that in one of the attachments?
Yes, it was the related information.
Is that the addendum, Councillor Castle, that was provided, the applicant's response?
Yes, it's not from the applicant. I believe it's from the city. Yes, it is the addendum. Oh, my apologies. It does say that was the applicant provided a response to the summary of submissions.
Would you like me to provide an answer to your question?
Yeah, just interested in your comment on that. Thank you.
Of course, no worries. So I guess that's a strategic consideration. So the city is, as you are aware, undertaking a review of our local planning strategy. Those are the types of considerations that will come up as part of that process. And I guess even if the site to the south was rezoned to a overshadowing still exists. So by metric standard, the same overshadowing will apply. If it was the subject site to the south was rezoned to say R100, it might be less of a departure, but it's still the same outcome. I guess the challenge that this particular site has is that we have a strategic framework and a planning framework that's being a level of density and development along Charles Street, and the site to the south developed prior to that coming into place or at a lower density, despite being able to achieve a better density. That's obviously resulted in a smaller site and a development that is incongruent with what the future vision of Charles Street is.
Thank you. That answers my question. Just one final small question. In relation to the sustainability principle, there's commentary in the DRP's report about considering a no gas or an all electric development. And I'm just wondering if the city could give some commentary on whether they considered including that as a condition, and what their considerations were there.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. So the city's comments in response to that particular query from the DRP, I guess recognise that the application doesn't specify one way or the other whether or not gas is proposed. That is typically something that would come as part of detailed design and a building permit application. It's not typically something that's considered under the planning framework because we haven't got a mechanism in our framework to be able to consider such things. I think if we had something from a state-led perspective or a councillor perspective on requesting that might be something that we could into the future. But under the current framework that we have, gas is outside the scope of our powers and our assessment parameters.
Thank you. That might be a conversation for another time then.
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor. The room, any questions of the staff?
Probably a question to both.
Yeah.
On condition 12, and I want to understand consequences in design terms are if that condition remains. What would you expect to provide, and then what changes to the design are necessary?
Sure. I would probably say that we are, thank you for the question, agnostic on how they deal with that. Obviously, there's lots of different ways with screening or planters or various material or design outcomes that reduce the views of clotheslines from the street and from neighbouring properties. So we don't have a preconceived idea on how that should be dealt with. We would much rather have a condition broadly worded that gives the applicant the ability to come up with some design-sensitive choice.
So it could be something on the balcony.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not saying not on the balcony, but if it is, it needs to be ameliorated in some way that doesn't have an visual impact from the public realm.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I guess my concern was the second part of it, which is the having to screen the drawing that's out there. So how does that look? Police and what impact does that have then on the balconies and the looks of them? And the DA, if we've got glass balustrating and we didn't screen anything that we're putting out there, sort of how does that really affect the look of the balcony? So that was the sustainability side of it, and sort of not using your dry. That's sort of, I appreciate that, but I guess then he's got this knock-on effect with respect to anything that's out there. He's going to have, it's not going to look very good, and having to screen it then might have if the city decides to police that from a compliance perspective, it just becomes a bit tricky. Often when you've lived in apartments, when you've got a clothes dryer, you'll always use the clothes dryer. You might have a small hanger out there for bits and pieces, but just having to, I guess, work around that and screen it, and how that might look and the knock-on effect it has in terms of the compliance aspect is just my concern. So we've got space for a dryer, and it would just be, I think, dry people will use that. Conditions, it's probably not necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I have a question. You may or may not have heard this conversation before. It relates to condition 7.4. There's been ongoing conversation about the Section 70A notification. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that and the application of that. The discussion that's occurred and information that we've previously been provided is that it's only a public authority notification, and the obligation of the applicant is to give consent to that occurring. Do you have any comments that you would wish to make in relation to this particular condition and the comments that I've just provided you? And I suppose the question goes to modification of the condition to reflect that matter.
Can I just, are you aware of that shift?
No, I'm actually not aware.
I might just expand on that just a
thank you.
little bit. Recently, the DAP was made aware, and it was through a legal challenge. And I do believe that the DAP will be distributing some information to local governments. It turns out that for us to put a condition to require the applicant to lodge the Section 70 is not appropriate. We've all done it that way forever, but it appears it is actually the onus on a local or on a public authority with the consent of the owner. So there might be a need to change that condition, which is what Member Lafanti is alluding to, and we're just seeking your feedback on that.
Yeah, so as I sort of indicated, I wasn't aware of that, that most recent advice through a challenge. If you don't mind, may I just pose a question? Has the DAP considered applications since that outcome with different wording?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Really consistently.
Excellent. The city would obviously be open to different wording. We would obviously be wanting to make recommendations that are sound, have orderly or proper planning principles and conditions that are enforceable. Obviously to be supportive of that condition. And after the questions, I'll be popping onto the minutes to have a look at this example to get an idea of what that could look like. Another question.
Thank you. Look, I have a few, and the one relates to that question I raised about the visitor parking behind the roller door. How does the city manage a situation? I'm not saying that this will be the case here, but it has happened. That's why I raised the issue, where that roller door becomes an issue and visitors don't, it stays closed and visitors don't see that parking, and therefore, how does the city manage that from a compliance perspective?
Thank you, party member. So the city, as part of our assessment, took the plans on where the location of the shutter door was. There is a shutter door, shutter further back, past the visitor bays, prior to the residential bays, which is where we to be. Based on the commentary and giving plans in more detail point, we can see that prior to the visitor bays. In this situation, we would be recommending a condition for a parking management plan to be provided and implemented for the life of the development. That has not been recommended as part of officer recommendation. However, open for the panel to consider such a condition if you see fit.
Thank you. Then picking up on Councillor Castle's comments, when I read the design review panel, and we sometimes get these, the design review panels, they're amazing, they're useful, and they add a lot to this process, but sometimes they'll offer opinion on how something can be approved that might not necessarily be within the planning framework or so on. So, and you answered it correctly. There are a couple of other minor issues or outstanding issues that the design review panel was left with. Can you very briefly, and you have dealt with it in the RA, but I just want your confirmation that you still feel, despite those few issues remaining, that the applicant has appropriately addressed all 10 design principles of SBP 7.0?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Yeah, the city takes the design review panel very seriously. We work very closely with the design review panel, and I think it's evidence that the applicant has also taken on the design review panel's feedback and suggestions, and that's been shown in the amendments that they've made and their attempts to reduce the impact of, in particular, overshadowing to that neighbouring property. As a result of some of the amendments that the applicant has made, the design review panel remain concerned in particular around bulk and scale to the northern boundary due to increased setbacks from the southern boundary. The 10 design principles are separate to what is required under the element objectives in volume 2. However, they do speak to each other. And assessment of the bulk and scale and the impact on the neighbouring property to the north, we considered that to be an appropriate design outcome and to still meet the relevant principle under the 10 design principles, particularly seeing as the sites to the north are currently single houses that haven't been developed on quite large sites. So we likely see at some point in the future a similar type of development to the scale that this one is. Scale is will be read appropriately along Charles Street. The type of development that I'm going to touch on any of the other.
Thank you very much. Very last thing from me, looking at some of the conditions. When I look at condition, the second paragraph is 7.2 and condition 7.3, they seem to be requiring the same.
Have a conversation with my colleague, our presiding member. Presiding member. So condition 7.2 relates to noise generated from the development to the neighbouring property, the impact of that, and ensuring that appropriate treatments are undertaken in accordance with the acoustic report to mitigate those impacts. Condition 7.3 is in relation to the noise received by the development from Charles Street in accordance with SPP 5.4.
Thank you. I did see that one talked about an acoustic report and one talked about a noise management plan, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay, you've answered that for me. Thank you very much. That is all from me. Unless there are other questions for the city officer, I think we are now in a position to move to the report. So in front of us, we have a report recommending approval of the proposal subject to conditions. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Do I have a second? Member Fanti, do you wish to speak to them?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I have reviewed all that's been provided, and well as I'm taking site considerations. I'm satisfied that this proposal, and I agree with the comments contained in the plan, that it aligns with the planning framework. I am acutely aware that areas are in transition. There will be some of these contextual challenges that sit next to between each other, and I note that the adjoining site to the south has a very small size lot, so therefore definitely is challenging at certain times of the day in terms of overshadowing. But overall, from my perspective, this proposal is appropriate in its locational context, and it's transitioning to the more intensive development that is supported and encouraged along this particular road. I note that there's been some design modifications incorporated as a result of the process that was undertaken through the DRP and the city, and these have been resolved and are now supportable in the overall consideration of the proposal. I'm also satisfied that in terms of on-site parking and access, a single vehicular driveway and dedicated parking. I note the comments and concerns in relation to the parking, the visitor parking. However, I'm satisfied that appropriate management methods can be in place, as well as city compliance matters, should the availability for visitor parking become some sort of de facto private parking arrangements. It is not uncommon from my perspective, particularly on these busy roads, to have some form of security protocols that sit towards the front of the property, and I'm satisfied that those have been provided both in the information we have and comments today can be appropriately managed within the context of this site. Overall, the site has great access to public transport as walkability to various facilities that support intensification of development. At this juncture, presiding member, I will amend. My amendment is obviously Amendment 1, is to do with condition 7.4. I will read it out and just highlight the changes for all of the parties considering it. So read as per the beginning of it, prior to the occupation or use of development, comma, insert the following words: the landowner shall provide consent to and then notification pursuant to, continue with the word section 70A of the Transfer of Land Act 1893 being placed on the certificate of title, and the notification shall apply. The notification shall notify owners and prospective purchasers of the following: that the lot is in close proximity to public transport corridor and may be affected by traffic, parking and noise. And the intention of this change is that the provision is to enable the city to incorporate, should they choose, that notification, as has been discussed earlier in today's meeting, that notification has been raised as something that we need to be considering consistent with the provisions of the legislation.
Can I just, before I seek a seconder for that amendment, could I just check some of that word? So currently it talks about the fact that it must be registered. I believe that there's no obligation on the local government to do it. So we change must to may. So if the local government decides they would like to register that notification, they may.
Correct.
And then, but it needs to be with consent of the applicant. So if we could just change must to may.
Yes.
Yep. Happy. Do I have a seconder for that amendment?
Could I suggest an advice note?
Yes, sure.
Would read condition 7.4 as not imposing an obligation on the local government. If the local government chooses to lodge a notification under section 70A, the proponent's obligation is to give their consent to the local government application and nothing more.
I'm comfortable. The additional clarification from my perspective provides both information to applicant as well as addresses the comments that we had discussed earlier in relation to the city offices.
So I'm happy to second it.
Happy to second. All right. Do you wish to speak further to that? No. Do you wish to speak further? Does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment? All right. Let's put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Back to you, Member Lafanti.
I have no further comments. I've provided those earlier.
Thank you. Member Hyam, a seconder of the substantive. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you. Yes. Being located within the transit corridor built form area seems to have influenced the suggested exercise of discretion to a greater extent than normal. This is acceptable as long as the resident amenity, being both those within the development and the neighbours, is not overly compromised. I note the concerns raised by the objectors. I don't necessarily agree with all the issues raised. In my view, the parking is adequate given the location of the site near the city and on a major transport corridor. The issue that needs careful consideration is that of overshadowing. There is no doubt that this development will have some impact on the adjoining property. It may not meet the solstice requirement, but there will be adequate sunlight, in my view, at other times of the day and year. There's a high density area in transition. Some impact will result, unfortunately. This is well addressed in the RAR. The neighbours have expressed concern over the loss of privacy from the reduced setbacks. Again, this is a product of developing in a high density area in transition. The applicant has endeavoured to address this with landscaping and building articulation. Remaining minor overlooking occurs despite this, however, only into driveways and walls without major openings. While there are a number of variations sought, I'm satisfied that the development satisfies the intent of the corridor objectives and sufficient measures have been taken to address concerns raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any of our councillors online wish to speak for or against the substantive? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, panel chair. I do support this application. I did have some concerns, but I'm very happy to have received some of the answers today, and I appreciate the information provided in the RAR and the additional information. Obviously, a key consideration was the overshadowing to the south, but as other panel members have noted, this is a transitional area and there is going to be difficulties in managing that. And I do appreciate the information that was provided about how the real impact will be felt in different months of the year and what that will look like for those neighbours. I think this application is occurring in an entirely appropriate location for the type of application we see. It aligns with the strategic vision for the city and is very well located for public transport and other access. For that reason, I'm very comfortable with the parking that's been provided, and I don't see that having a significant impact on the surrounding areas. I'm also happy to retain clause 12 relating to the drying facilities. I think that is an important part of the sustainability initiatives and ensuring that homeowners and residents have the option to not use their dryer, even if they have that made available to them. And I think that's important to preserve the facade and the visual amenity of the building, that is screened. So on that basis, I'm happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wolf, do you wish to speak?
I do. Thank you, Presiding Member. After weighing up all of the information, I do support the recommendation. This part of Charles Street is really an ideal location for increased density, being a major road with a high frequency bus route. It's across, as we've mentioned, from a multiple dwelling development of a similar height, and it's really near to the public open space at Charles Verriard Reserve. And this particular part of Charles Street is very much in need of renewal. I think that the height is not only compliant, it's reasonable, and there have been efforts made to sort of reduce those bulk and scale impacts. As per our line of questioning this morning, the two issues that did give me some pause were the overshadowing and the visitor car bay. But I do agree with the earlier comments that in looking at the total number of bays and its location and proximity to public transport, that discretion in terms of the visitor bay shortfall is appropriate. And regarding the overshadowing issue, I certainly do hear the tension here between the desired future planning context adopted by the city and the built form that currently exists. I note the overshadowing and what sunlight will still be received by the adjoining properties. And also noted with interest those comments, although they're outside the scope of the current application around future rezoning of transitional sites, regardless, noting the sort of physical limitations of that as a mitigation strategy. To close, finishing up with condition 12, I do support retaining that one. I think it's a low impact requirement that keep clotheslines out of view. And we do have to assume normal residential use, and that includes people hanging their washing outside. And as we heard from the city officers, that's an environmentally friendly approach anyhow. So I do support retaining that condition. So on the whole, wish the applicants all the very best and look forward to seeing the build progressing.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I speak to the substantive motion, I would like to move a further couple of amendments. The first one is an amendment to condition 3.2, which refers to the schedule of colours and materials. I'd like to add the wording unless otherwise agreed by the city at the end of the condition. Do I have a second? Thank you. Look, the reason for that additional wording is the city has the ability to approve minor modifications anyway, but the current wording could be construed or could cause issues in the future because it doesn't seem to leave room for minor deviations from the schedule. That could be problematic during detailed design construction or even during future maintenance of the development. So I would just have that wording included. Behind you.
No, that's
Does any other member wish to speak for or against that? No, let's put that amendment. All those in favour? Unanimously. Thank you. Then my second amendment is a new condition requiring the provision of a parking management plan. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Member Hyam. Look, I think I'm not seeking a 30-page document here, but given the conversation that's happened today about potential use of visitor bays, and it may well be that some of the visitor bays are not allocated to visitor parking, but it may be that they're not used, and there might be some ability for the owners and occupiers of the development to then manage that accordingly and allow those bays to be used for visitor parking on a temporary basis or whatever the case may be. I also have a little bit of a concern about those visitor bays being located behind a roller door. I fully support the reasoning behind it, but I have seen previous examples where that visitor parking doesn't get used like it should because sometimes the roller door is closed. People don't see the visitor parking unless they're regular visitors to the development, and therefore they end up parking on the street. So I think if that can be managed via a parking management plan, it may well be a few paragraphs that are agreed between the applicant and the city. It just provides the city with the ability to manage that in future if that becomes an issue. What I'm suggesting is the wording of that condition is as follows. Prior to lodgement of a building permit, a parking management plan shall be submitted to the city for consideration and approval. The approved parking management plan shall thereafter be implemented for the duration of the development unless otherwise agreed by the city. As seconded, do you wish to speak?
no, I think you've covered it very well.
Does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment? No, let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I'll revert to the substantive motion now. I'm happy to support the recommendation for approval. This, in my view, is a very well-designed development, proposing a diversity of much-needed accommodation options in a location very well serviced by public transport and in an area earmarked for higher density development under the applicable planning framework. Technically, the development could be higher and up to 4 stories plus the proposed basement. The applicants worked well with the topography of the site to include the basement level with little impact on neighbours. I acknowledge the concerns that were raised during the consultation process. However, the height and massing and the extent of overshadowing are considered acceptable in my view, given the higher density coding and future envisaged build form for the site under the underlying planning framework. Overshadowing is assessed by the R code provisions that describe worst case scenario overshadowing of winter. This amount of overshadowing is not present all day and it varies greatly throughout the different seasons. The properties to the south will still receive adequate sunlight, especially for properties that are in a designated medium and higher density zone. I think the issue of overlooking has been addressed appropriately through design changes, including an increase in southern boundary setbacks and substantial planting, and will be further managed through relevant conditions of approval. A further issue raised and discussed today is the amount of parking proposed and concerns about potential impacts on street parking in the area. In my view, even though 1 less visitor bay is being proposed than suggested by the R codes, there is an 8 bay parking surplus provided overall. The applicant could have chosen to provide 1 extra visitor base and 8 less resident bays, and that would have ticked all the boxes. It's my view that the current arrangement has more benefit to the surrounding area than a fully compliant one, particularly considering the extent of street parking available near the site and the location of the site to public transport. Proposal has largely been supported by the city's design review panel, and the minor outstanding issues that the panel raised, I think, either are not entirely relevant within the planning framework or they have been appropriately addressed in the city's responsible authority. So very happy to support this application on that basis. With that, I will hand back to Member Lafanti as the mover to close. So
No further comments.
Nothing to add. All right, we're going to put the substantive motion as amended to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, Form 2 DAP applications for Vincent. There are nil today. Section 31 SAT reconsiderations also. With that, I thank Councillor Wolfe and Councillor Castle for your attendance and your participation today. I hope you have a good day. Does anybody need a 2-minute break? Right, I'm going to move a procedural motion to adjourn the meeting 5 minutes for a comfort break. Second that. All in favour? Right, we'll come back in a couple of minutes. I know you've been waiting a while, but to get through the next bit, we probably need a comfort break.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, City of Melville, it's Ashley at DAPS, just confirming that you can hear us. Just want to test your speaker before we get restarted.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Right, welcome back, everybody. Moving on now to Part C of our agenda for the City of Melville. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Glenys Barber and Councillor Nicole Robbins, our local government DAP members, to the panel. Item 1, declaration of due consideration. Panel members have considered all the documentation contained within Part C of the agenda and the Part C related information. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have considered all information? Excellent, thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. I have a disclosure of interest, impartiality interest from Councillor Barber. The disclosure details are that Councillor Barber participated in a briefing by the city officers on the content of the responsible authority report. Councillor Barber, could I just check for the purpose of the record that that briefing was really about the factual information in the report only, and it didn't lean to any opinions or recommendations and so on? Okay, excellent.
Madam Chair, I attended the same.
You attended the same briefing. All right. So there's an impartiality interest for both elected members. I would like to, just for the record, there is a standing declaration of interest that we have, that if the agenda items have been considered at a council meeting or the local government DAP members have been briefed by staff on the facts of the matter in accordance with our code of conduct, they are not bound by any of that information or any previous decisions of council. I've considered those matters and determined that those impartialities should not prevent these two elected members from participating or voting in relation to this application today. Are there any other disclosures that members wish to make? No? All right, thank you. Item 3 then, moving on to our Form 1 DAP application today. We have seen this application before, and there are some familiar faces in the room. Welcome back to most of you. It is for lots 143 and 144, numbers 34 and 36 at Michael Terrace, Mount Pleasant. Childcare premises, DAP number 25/02925. We have quite a large number of presenters on this item today, and we have also received 4 submissions. One of our presenters, Esther Cole, who was going to present, unfortunately had to leave us. So we will take Esther's submission as a written submission because we have all had a chance to read that submission. We also have Ray Pardo from Carcione and Herbie from the applicant team to answer questions from the panel if required. There are quite a few of you today, so I remind you that in accordance with our standing orders, your presentation is limited to 3 minutes. I will call you to time when you hit your 3 minutes so that everyone is afforded the same opportunity. Some of the deputation submissions we received were very lengthy. I don't expect that you would read all of those to us, so I encourage you to focus on the key things that you'd like to get across in your 3 minutes, and then we'll be able to ask you questions after your presentation. We will start today with Mohammed Rasuli from Transcorp. And I believe Mohammed is speaking in support of the recommendation.
Good morning, community. I'm not going to talk, speak support or against the development. I'm providing my independent review of the traffic and parking assessment reports, which was undertaken for this development. My name is Mohammed Rasuli, and I am speaking on behalf of the St. Michael Tricks Community Action Group, and will provide my independent review of the updated traffic and parking assessment reports. I'm going to be brief, and I focus on 4 points. I already provided a technical note, which documented all my reasons and review of the reports. But here I'm just focusing on 4 points. First, the parking management plan, which relies on restrictions that are not realistically enforceable. Second, the visitor parking supply, which is likely to be underestimated. Third, St. Michael Trace existing condition, which does not have the physical, standard, and functional capacity for this intensity. And fourth, the potential queue and congestion at St. Michael Trace and Queens Road intersection, yet no intersection modeling has been provided. I go to the first one, which is the main issue. The parking management plan relies on unenforceable time restrictions. The applicant's key mitigation to restrict childcare and drop-offs between 8:30 a.m. to 8:50 a.m. and pickups between 2:40 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. to avoid overlap with the school peaks. But the PMP do not demonstrate how this can be enforced. If the restrictions cannot be reliably enforced, then they cannot be relied on to prevent congestion, queuing, or spillover parking at the critical times. Further, the assessments undertaken in the updated traffic and parking reports do not consider the impact of the suggested time restrictions. Second, parking supply. The visitor parking provision is likely insufficient and underestimated the demand. The updated TIS suggests 9 visitor bays based on the assumed 46 inbound vehicles in the morning peak hour, an average waiting time of 7 minutes. However, the inbound demand is likely to be higher than 50%. The inbound traffic in the morning is expected to be about 57% of the peak hour trips rather than 50%, which would lift inbound arrivals to about 56 vehicles in the AM peak hour. Also, the 7-minute dwell time is optimistic and not consistent with the PMP recommendation of 10 minutes.
Time is up. Could I ask you to draw to a close, please?
Correct. I go to the St. Michael Trace capacity, and with the street is not suited to this scale of the additional traffic. St. Michael Trace near the site is about 5.8 meters wide and functions as a lower order access street D as per livable neighborhood guidelines. An access street D has an upper threshold capacity of 100 vehicles per hour. Existing peak hour flows are around 60 vehicles per hour, and the childcare would add around 92 to 98 vehicles per hour, taking the total to approximately 150 to 150 vehicles.
I will have to draw you to a close now, unfortunately. We have read your submission, so we have seen all that information. I want to take the opportunity to see if any of the members have questions for you on what you've said today and the information that you provided us. Do any members have a question?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I have received all the material that you've sent in. And my question goes to particularly the issue of capacity of road. I'm not so much speaking about the peak hour movement or the parking on site or the management plan that you refer to. You speak about the capacity of road as being a particular issue of concern, and I note that the RA itself, the city officers, their traffic and road team speak about a variety of matters from the traffic impact statement, and one of the comments that they refer to here is that they indicate that, and this is only contextual about the road capacity, that the existing and forecast traffic in St. Michael's Terrace is below the daily volume tolerance and not expected to adversely impact the operational performance or function of the local access road. They go on to talk also directly after that the existing and forecasted traffic volumes, including those generated by the development, remain below the threshold. In that context, could you please respond to the concerns that you've raised about capacity of road as this RA from the cities themselves analysing the different traffic documents we've received? Could you qualify your commentary that you've referred to in that context, or you can add another matter if I've misinterpreted that?
No, that's correct. The RAR refers to the main road hierarchy and classifies this road as access street. So main road hierarchy is, my understanding, is based on the very old WPC road hierarchy system, which has been established previously and combine everything below 3,000 vehicles per day as an access street. However, we have got WPC level neighborhood guidelines, which classifies different access streets, like access street D, access street A, access street B, and neighborhood connectors, neighborhood connector B. So all of these classification under the WPC level neighborhood guidelines, which is more appropriate for this location, all of these can carry less than 3,000 vehicles per day. However, access street D, which is based on the width of the carriageway, at the end of the day, the capacity of the road is relevant to the width of the carriageway. The width of the carriageway is 5.8 meters and it's narrow. So the livable neighborhood for this type of streets assumes or considers access street D with upper threshold limit of 1,000 vehicles per day, which translates to 100 vehicles per hour. It all comes to amenity. This existing street carries about 60 vehicles per hour. We are adding about 90 to 98 vehicles per hour. Double suddenly, next day after development, in the morning, everybody will see that the AM and PM peak hour traffic is doubled as a minimum. So it comes to amenity of this road and the level of service of this road. So there are assessments that you can do to understand what is the level of service of this road at the current condition. When you add your development, what should be level of service? Similarly, this affects its connection and intersection with the Queens Road as well. It's a four-way intersection. During the morning, turning movements, especially right turn, is difficult. It operates as a level of service which has not been documented in the traffic report. When you add your development, this amenity, this level of service would change. Again, this has not been demonstrated. Is it acceptable or is not acceptable? I understand the childcare center is not a high trip generator, and even WPC guidelines indicates that if the development generally less than 100 vehicles per hour, the impact is moderate. However, this is very close to the threshold. The trip generation based on the TIS is 92. If you just
so I was more, my focus of the questions was really the commentary that the city's own technical staff had formed a different conclusion in my read of this than what you just said about the road capacity. It was really just that specific element. I'm aware of all the other comments.
So, and I have a follow on, and I'm going to ask you just because we've got a lot just to focus on that. So picking up on Member Lafanti's question, when using an argument that the road network is operating within daily capacity and that extra vehicles generated won't cause the numbers to exceed that capacity, does that simplistically apply to the number of cars the road is typically able to handle on a daily basis without backing up the surrounding network? Or does it consider specific locational points of congestion that may be generated by other existing land uses?
It again comes to the capability and level of service of the road, these thresholds. So theoretically, you may be able to have more than 1,000 vehicles per day on this road. But the question is that, do you feel the same comfort when you're driving on this road when the traffic is 100 vehicles per hour during the peak hours or 200 vehicles per hour during the peak hours? To summarize, I would put it to the capacity of the road, to the width of the road. At the end of the day, the cars will use the width of the road to move on the road. And the width of this road, 5.8, I think is narrow. And when it connects to the Queens Road, again, the intersection, the geometry of this intersection is not wide enough to accommodate additional traffic. I don't say that it's going to be very congested, or I haven't done the assessment, but my point is that the assessment, and this has not been demonstrated. It hasn't been demonstrated that this street has a level of service and its intersection has a level of service. And when you add the development, how this amenity and level of service would change. This definitely will change. And for the
So can I just bring you back? Is that the reason why your view is different to the city's officers' view on this, which is Member Lafanti's question? They seem to think that the capacity is not a problem. You're saying it is. Is that the reason why?
No, the main reason is the width of the road. The width of the road, 5.8 meter, is not wide enough to carry more than 1,000 vehicles per day. So that's first thing. And I refer to the livable neighborhood, which is more relevant guideline in this situation than main road guideline, which is for higher order and more major roads within the city. Okay, so that's the different point. So the first is the reference to the guideline, and the second is the width. Focus should be on the width of the road, not the length of the road, because we are talking about the capacity. So
I think you've answered Member Lafanti's question. She's satisfied you've answered it. Thank you. I'm going to have to.
Can I do a follow-up question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, and please see if you can keep it brief. Are you suggesting then that the comment in the RAR where it says we met the road which remains below the maximum, in other words, number of vehicles per day, acceptable traffic volume tolerance of 3,000 vehicles per day for a local access road. So if it was 200 millimetres wider, 6 metres, would it be able to take up to 3,000 vehicles?
The next level of access street up from D is access street C, I think is 6.2 meters.
So the 3,000 vehicles per day in the RAR is incorrect.
It's incorrect. In my view, it is incorrect because it refers to main road hierarchy for access street overall. So main road doesn't have classified access streets to D and different categories, but livable neighborhood, which is for the.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions of this presenter? No further questions. Thank you for your deputation. Next deputation.
Thank you, everyone. And apologies if I talk a little bit quickly to keep the mic moving.
Don't go long.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. But being here and having to consider an unchanged proposal says a lot on the developer's lack of understanding of the site and disregard for valid and legal concerns. The parents that have to jump curbs and circle the block and park illegally and nervously shepherd their 3, 4 and 5-year-olds through that intersection will and have told the City of Melville and DAP why this centre does not work and how it will increase the risk to our children. I've personally seen the near misses, a child running into the road and into the side of a car. And while all here are aware of the Rouse Hill tragedy, those uncounted near misses and injuries that don't make the news cannot be disregarded. The developer has presented no meaningful changes, adding only operational measures that are impractical to enforce and impossible to police. The idea of a childcare for parents to not drop off or pick up at the most convenient times for the centre's target users and Mount Pleasant Primary School parents is nonsensical and only pushes them into idling in their car, parked on the street, and further worsening the congestion and risk. And that's on top of the included parking not being sufficient, even against the meagre LPP requirements that somehow tolerate tandem bays or shift workers. Waste management has also had no real change and only a weak operational control reference. Even the minor changes City of Melville Waste team requested for reorientation of the exits and entrances were ignored and will only take a reassessment from the next waste team or a minor incident for the poor person lugging those bins in and out to mean that they are back out on the verge. This is a large commercial business, not an elderly person needing help moving their bins. On-site collection is entirely feasible but still avoidable. Even a regular delivery truck cannot get into this facility and will be parked on the street. Developer has also incorrectly diminishes the applicability of a DPLH position statement on childcare, despite it being progressed such that it has to be seriously considered and its specific intent to be used where a local planning policy has gaps on specific guidance, as the City of Melville does for centre size in a residential area. Even the discretion it calls up to use is needed here, given the centre's location on an already too busy and hazardous low-order local access road intersection. The fact that an extra large centre on R20 land and low water access roads does not exist in the Perth metro area shows the statement just provides some policy to help enforce the sensible and avoid decisions that will set a very concerning precedent. Financial feasibility is not a basis for a decision by DAP, especially given the lack of any sort of evidence and the fact that small and medium centres have recently been and continue to be built in the city of Melville and Perth metro. The insistence by developer that there is a lack of childcare in the area is also false, with 10 in a 2 to 4 minute drive and all but one of them very actively advertising to fill their significant vacancies. There is no Mount Pleasant parent that is inconvenienced in having to use the childcare centres already available. So the idea of ignoring the significant deficiencies of this proposal to approve it based on perceived need is very difficult to process.
Your time, Aaron. To close.
Statements by developer that this extra large centre would not cause significant adverse amenity impact is factually incorrect against any measure used to quantify it, from the traffic more than doubling, not the 10 to 30% usually used, or noise, with the AIS not quantifying road traffic noise, or the waste and service vehicles and canopy noise. It is by any measure a large commercial business on an otherwise quiet residential street.
Thank you. Members, any questions of this presenter? Member Lafanti.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm not going to speak a question to all of it. I have questions specifically to your comments around the traffic impact, intersection impact, and congestion. Can you clarify whether those concerns relate specifically to the peak period of the school during the school days, or whether it also includes other times of day? It seems that many of the comments related to that congested tree around those peak periods.
Yes, the congestion, the peak periods are the concern in terms of congestion, absolutely. It struggles to accommodate what it has to now. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to visit the site. Yesterday morning was nuts. But I think I presented previously that it's sort of a street or area of two modes. It's either congested and dental trying to get through, or it turns back into a quiet residential street. And then, out of term, the 3 months a year that it isn't there, this traffic would, it doesn't just triple it. Those periods, it's 4 or 5 times what it would normally get. So that amenity impact versus what it normally has to accommodate is exacerbated.
Any questions? Any further questions? Councillor Barber.
Thank you for your presentation. I must admit, on my way here this morning, I saw the impact of first or second day back at school, and it was bedlam. But a comment you made was about precedents. In your talk, you quickly discussed one. What precedent would you like to offer us?
Too much time sifting through the DAP decisions of the last 3 years. And there is not a decision that supports a extra large centre on R20 land on low water access roads. But there's been no precedent for that decision as far as I can tell. And even existing centres, there's no precedence. This centre would be bigger than any currently operating in the city of Melville. The only one that's currently being built on a much busier road, is only marginally higher in terms of quantity and size.
Further questions? No. Thank you, Aaron. Our next presenter is Andrew Hall. He's meant to be online, but he may have some connectivity issues. Do we have Andrew? All right.
I can confirm Andrew is not available.
He did flag it might be a bit of a problem. All right. Again, just for the record, we have received Andrew's submission. We have read it and we will take it into account. We will move then on to Greg Pollane. Come forward, please.
I'm doing 2 presentations.
That's right. I'm going to give you, do you want me to give you 6 minutes, or do you want to just roll to yours and then on behalf of the other resident?
Okay, so I'll start with mine, will I?
Sure. I'll call you to time on yours after.
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity again to speak today. This proposal introduces foreseeable, avoidable and unmitigated safety risks to children attending the Mount Pleasant Primary School, as well as many senior citizens who share the St Michael Terrace Queens Road intersection. These risks are inconsistent with proper planning and cannot be addressed or resolved by the applicant staff procedures. Australian and international studies confirm conclusively that high traffic zones significantly increase pedestrian vehicle collision risks for children who just don't have the spatial awareness and cognitive capacity to deal with such traffic congestion. Yesterday, the WA Police launched a statewide operation, increasing their presence around schools in hope of improving safety as the new school term begins. Officers utilising marked vehicles, motorcycles and speed cameras to monitor traffic, targeting speed and driver inattention. This operation demonstrates the extreme and well-known risks that children are subjected to in school zones and the continual battle police face, as well as P&Cs and school management, to control speeding and driver inattention within school zones. While we're all aware of these school zone risks, we congregate here today to discuss the merit of the construction and operation of a 113-child, 29-staff, extra-large commercial daycare centre that the applicant wants to construct directly opposite an operating primary school with some 500 students. It just doesn't make any sense in terms of safety. The applicant also proposes a basement car park with inadequate client parking bays and no reversing bay. Some 600 plus vehicles will cross the SMT, St Michael Terrace footpath per day, adding a new, foreseeable and completely unnecessary high-risk conflict point for scores, if not hundreds, of vulnerable school children and senior citizens. It does this 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. On October 30, 2025, excuse me, little girl, 5-year-old Isla Metcalf was tragically struck and killed by a vehicle while riding her scooter on a footpath outside the Roos Hill Primary School in New South Wales. The applicant's proposal replicates the same dangerous design elements as the Roos Hill School tragedy, which includes hundreds of unnecessary child footpath crossings every day, increased traffic congestion and reduced driver and pedestrian visibility. School parking is already limited, and based on accounts from many parents that I have spoken to while door knocking, there is significant competition for these parking bays.
Time is up, Greg, if I can draw you to a close.
The applicant was requested by the committee on October 9 DAP meeting members to reconsider the scale of the proposal. The applicant declined to reduce the scale. The applicant has also refused to redesign the car park entry-exit points off Queen's Road, where there is no footpath to cross. If the applicant had agreed to that design change, it would have eliminated the most significant child safety hazard in the entire proposal.
We'll have to bring you to a close now.
Thank you.
Stay right where you are. Do any members have questions of Mr. Paul Lane on the basis of his own presentation? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Greg, just a question about the safety of children during those peak drop-off and pick-up times. The applicant's proposal to limit drop-off and pick-up at the childcare centre during those peak periods to only families that have a child also at the primary school, does that do anything to address your concerns around the safety?
No, not at all, because it's based on procedures and work instructions and staff notices. It's a procedural change. And if you look at the hierarchy of controls, it's not workable. It's not feasible. We can't manage it. In our opinion, in my opinion, it won't happen. I think it's been touched on by others as well. People will overstay the 7 minutes, the 10 minutes. And frankly, I think the basement car park is going to be very unpopular. Clients I probably will park on the street anyway because the parking is limited. It's horizontal parking, it's not angled. It's going to be difficult and awkward to get out of. There's no reverse bay. I'll park on the street. Let's not even go into the stench that will be down there as a result of the multiple refuse bins.
Okay, you've answered that question. Thank you. Any further questions? All right, I'm going to let you have your 3 minutes now on behalf of the other.
Okay. Dear DAP members, thank you for the opportunity of this presentation. As a mother and resident of the immediate area around the proposed development, and as one who regularly walks the road with my children adjacent to the area of the development proposal, I ask that you robustly consider the below in your assessment of the proposed childcare premises at St Michael's Terrace. The proposed development will be deeply and disproportionately detrimental to our community for the following reasons. The traffic and safety risks it presents to young children with a significantly increased number of vehicles at key times, walking and riding to school, are material and cannot be overstated. A recent near miss illustrates our valid concerns. In December 2025, a young girl ran out between two parked cars on Queen's Road. Mercifully, the young girl was not hurt. Additional traffic, vehicles and children will only serve to increase the risk of incidents like this. With respect, there is no justifiable need for the development in this precise location. Within 2 kilometre radius from 34 to 36, there are currently 7 childcare facilities advertising as as having vacancies for every age group from birth, every day of the week, Monday to Friday. Having read the applicant's submission, none of the concerns raised by the local community have been sufficiently addressed. The main reason for this is that the concerns are real and simply cannot be mitigated against. This is not a safe or ideal location for an extra large childcare premises. I implore the panel to represent the community in this consideration of this proposal. Impartiality is not the concern here. As a community, we have the right to preserve the safety and amenity of St Michael's Terrace and the peaceful community we enjoy and raise our children within. Please acknowledge our concerns and refuse this proposal development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next, I'm not going to ask for questions because the deputy is not here. Julio Cesar Denis Costa.
So thank you for the opportunity to talk. I was not able to come physically last time. I'm here with my wife, Marissa. We jointly own the property right in front of the proposed development. I also have my son, Rod, who recently gave us our 3rd grandchildren. Our application is quite detailed, so I don't intend to go over that. I wish to take these 3 minutes just to talk about one simple question. First of all, during this process, we got to know the neighbors much better now. There's a positive thing coming from this. Exactly, that's great people. We looking forward to develop our property and live close to them. Currently, we are on hold in that situation. The quick question, and I try to be impartial in our submission, right? Because obviously we want to provide right information. So, but the key question for us is that will this development make the life better or worse for people already living there? So even though we have selfish reasons to oppose this, we also now know the community have much better reasons to oppose, which is the unity of the community that's now fully joined together against this. So as I consider not only the information I put in my application, which I really thank you for reading that, and I take a bit of a step back and look beyond that, there's no doubt in my mind that despite the real traffic issues that we face there, which everyone talked about it, the amenities are going to be substantially deteriorated, right? Especially selfishly for us, but for everyone. So the only answer to me possible to this question is that this application, this development will make the life much worse for everyone living there. So I want to leave like that and just if you have any questions from my applications, happy to answer that.
Very much. Members, any questions for this presenter? Thank you very much. Right, Leanne Anderson.
I'm here on the Mount Pleasant Primary School policy behalf. I'm just going to summarise our deputation and add a little bit to it. The main concern that we have is still the traffic and the safety of the children. The key intersection identified requiring urgent attention is St Michael's Terrace and Queen's Road. As a school, we do actively encourage walking, scooting, riding to school. There's no traffic crossing or lady, person with the things that helps the children cross the road. There's a preschool there as well. And we're a bit skeptical about the 10-minute drop off and pick up because you have to take your child physically into the kindergarten and pre-primary. We fear adding more traffic to the area. It's already crowded. I mean, I live and breathe it every day. And especially children with special needs as well, trying to navigate with more traffic coming through. There are main concerns. I mean, if the development was to go ahead, we would hope they'd put in some footpaths, a traffic crossing. The PNC have been working with the Melville City Council to try and alleviate the parking issue, which has been an issue for a long time. I mean, parents park on St. Michael's Terrace, but they also park in the residential areas. And 10 minutes is just not enough. And on behalf of the PNC, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. Members, any questions of this presenter?
Thank you. My question relates to your comments and the material you've provided us regarding the school, and I'm focusing around one of the key issues that's coming out of all the submissions has been the congestion and traffic. You spoke about elements that would provide additional safety, such as traffic crossings and footpaths. And I suppose I'm interested in your comments about why you would align that, or why you think that should be sort of associated with this development, or is something happening in the background with the school, the council and others in relation to what I understood your comments were specifically about the school, the children from the school and the parent behaviour associated with those children from the school, both in parking on both streets. So I'm interested in the link that you have on those solutions to the development side.
So the solutions are not currently going on in the background for the school at the moment. I mean, there is a problem, but I guess what we're saying is if you know it did go ahead, then we would hope that in consultation with the council or whoever, that we would have to have some sort of new footpath put in. There's no footpath there currently. There's one on the other side. Sorry, I've got a blocked ear. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, so in your presentation and in today's commentary, you spoke about the some safety issues, so things like a traffic crossing, footpath, but you also talked about parent parking behaviour in terms of both streets, and you referred to some of the solutions being in discussion with and linked to the development site. And I'm trying to unpick what your thinking was, or the schools or the PNC's thinking was, in terms of the obligation for the congestion and pedestrian movement associated with the school, and what actions you're aware of that are occurring independent of the development site.
Okay, I'm just gonna
Can I just, this is for me, are you asking, there appears to be a problem anyway, and what's being done to fix that problem?
Correct. And then and what's the expectation of that?
That's what I'm understanding you're saying, yeah. So there is a problem anyway, but if their development did go ahead, it's going to be a huge problem. Does that make sense? Am I answering?
It does make sense. I'm trying to unpack what I'm essentially trying to get from you, reference to your comments, that you reference solutions for safety being a pedestrian crossing and footpath that you tied to the development. And I'm aware of the material that everyone's provided in relation to the school parking. My specific question was the link or the expectation that I interpreted. You were referring to the development as having an obligation to some of the existing safety matters that you raised.
Okay. I'm just going to read from the president what she. This is she's added in that if we were to go ahead, we would like to see some traffic safety measures put in place, such as a footpath on the other side of the road and safer crossing options. That's coming from the president of the PNC. So I'm here.
The other side of the road being the same side as the proposal.
The same side as the proposal.
Yeah.
So there's nothing there at the moment. It's just a block of land with residential area. There's no footpaths. There's no traffic crossings. There's nothing. But obviously on the Mount Pleasant side, there's a footpath. There's parking bays that go vertically, and then the St. Michael's Terrace is very narrow. It's tiny. Sorry, Queen's Road. The Queen's Road.
That's fine.
Sorry if I haven't.
Okay. Any further questions?
Is Mr. McGrail?
Just to avoid confusion, there is a footpath. The only footpath on Michael's Terrace is already on the development site. The additional footpath would be on the opposite side where there's none.
Yeah.
And there's also no footpath on the Queen's Road side of the development as well.
All right,
thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. I think we have Sasha Coe online. Sasha and Wendy. No, online. Do we have Sasha and Wendy in the room? We do not have them online either. Again, for the record, Sasha and Wendy both provided written deputations, so we have reviewed those and we will take them into account. Do we have Vanessa Mather?
I'm on her behalf. Is that okay? She couldn't come, but she's given me what she would like read out.
Right. Ideally, we needed to have that before, but come forward.
Okay.
So we, for our record, come forward.
Good morning, everybody. And on behalf of Vanessa, thank you for the opportunity to be heard. My reason for this submission is to formally object to the proposed childcare centre on St Michael's Terrace. I consider that there is no place for a commercial business of this size at the proposed site. St Michael's Terrace is a quiet residential area, and the proposed site is across the road from the Mount Pleasant Primary School, where there is already traffic congestion problems during the school drop-off and pick-up times, to the extent that local residents avoid the intersection of St Michael's Terrace and Queen's Road when driving to their destinations. Safety is a major concern. Children walk and ride to school using the single footpath on St Michael's Terrace and are encouraged to do so by the local school. Local residents, myself included, also use the footpath to access other amenities and transport on Reynolds Road. The delivery and rubbish trucks, staffing and coming and going, parents dropping off their children at the childcare centre will bring them risk. Small children have little or no road sense, and however vigilant their parents or carers are, a child can see something of interest and dart out onto the path of incoming traffic, resulting in tragedy. A childcare centre is supposed to be a place of safety for children whilst their parents and carers are at work. But this should not be at the expense of the safety of local children going to and from school and residents going about their daily lives. In addition, heavy vehicles, concrete trucks and the like will be coming and going through the building phase, which is likely to take up to 18 months plus. These will pose additional dangers to all who use St Michael's Terrace. The applicant would have us believe that the childcare centre is needed in the area. A check on the surrounding areas shows that there are ample, better located childcare centres with vacancies in the locality. So in conclusion, I consider that the cost of this childcare centre in terms of safety risks to children and residents and the loss of amenities for those who live in the locality is completely unacceptable, and respectfully, I request that you reject the proposal outright. Respectfully, Vanessa Mather.
Thank you very much. Right, our last presenter of the day is Mark Scarfoni from Element Advisory. And I believe you have Ray Pardo and Paul Gantos. Is Paul in the room or is he online? What? All right.
Thank you, presiding member, panel members, for the opportunity to make a deputation today. Childcare premises are an important community facility which grow, population growth and changing demographics. I'd like to speak in support of the proposal and in support of the officer's the alternative recommendation to approve the development. As many of you know, I worked at the City of Melville for a long time and was involved in assessing development in accordance with this very framework. When I was first engaged to assist with this proposal, my gut reaction was that this is an excellent location for the childcare premises, which meets all of the desirable characteristics outlined in the City of Melville's local planning policy, with the exception of the local road, and meets none of the undesirable characteristics. The size of the site allows for the development to be sited and designed in a way which is consistent with the residential character of the area, providing large landscaped spaces and providing a buffer between the play areas and the surrounding residential uses. As the design has developed in terms of the concept into detailed design, and as the supporting reports have come through, I've become more confident that this is a suitable location and it is consistent with the local planning policy. In response to the deferral reasons, the DAP and the DAP decision back in October, the applicant team or the project team has considered the key issues and made some changes in relation to the way it relates to the street, particularly the fencing design and the way waste is managed to ensure that that happens outside of peak hours in a regular manner to ensure there's no amenity impacts on the adjoining properties. We're also provided a parking management plan, which provides a framework for the future operator to operate their business and to manage their business. That will need to be communicated to parents as they're enrolling at this particular centre, and that may factor into their decision-making process about whether this is a suitable location for them. So parking management has been specifically designed to ensure that it doesn't conflict with the existing operating hours of the primary school that's situated directly opposite. As a direct response to the comments that we've heard today. So there's also been a road safety audit prepared as a preemptive measure. The city had initially recommended that that be done as a condition of approval.
You're at your 3 minutes. I'm going to ask you to close pretty soon, please. If you can wrap up, I'm sure we'll have lots of questions.
Road safety audit, we've done that preemptively. The city has recognised that that road safety audit is suitable, and they will update to take into account those recommendations as part of their overall works program. In conclusion, this site is very well located, directly opposite existing school and other amenities. It will provide convenient access for future users of this facility and has been designed and supported by technical reports that demonstrate there is not a future potential amenity impact as outlined in the reasons for refusal. Support.
Thank you very much. And we have Mr. Gantos online. Panel members, questions for the applicant team. Mid-council.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions from me. So first of all, obviously the recommendation of the DAP from its last meeting, there are a few things that were recommended, but one of them was to reduce the size of the development. Can you talk us through sort of how you considered that recommendation and why you came to the decision not to reduce the overall size?
There are a couple of factors. The There was a comment around looking at a different access point, an access arrangement. That resulted in a poor interface with adjoining residents and resulted in a long driveway along that western boundary, and still required the same amount of car parking, similar amount of car parking within the basement. So it reduced the landscaped area. It resulted in increases in hard surfaces and that poor amenity impact on the adjoining properties. The second answer is that there is a lot of demand for childcare places within the locality, and that demand is only projected to increase with increasing population. So the design and the outcome was that we sought to seek approval for the design of children as per the proposal.
Just another one, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair. Through you. Just a question about the comment in the report about when the visitor bays are all full, vehicles not having the opportunity to turn around and having to reverse out onto a main road. Are you confident that you can address that concern through Condition 19, which is some changes to the parking management plan? And if so, is it possible for you to now just talk us through briefly how you think that those concerns can be addressed?
A couple of things that I guess have come up in the assessment that are in the parking management plan, and we acknowledge the comments that made by the 9 visitor parking bays are calculated based on a mathematical formula which indicates a peak demand for those bays based on the visitor numbers. And so it was seen as being a suitable number of bays to provide. It is 2 less than required by the city's local planning policy, but overall the number of car parking bays is consistent with the requirements of local planning policy 1.6. As if the panel is concerned that there are not enough visitor parking bays, then we are open to increasing the number of visitor parking bays from 9 to 11, and having a commensurate reduction in the number of staff parking bays on site, if that's you want to look at. In terms of the actual management of the parking, which we do consider is a sufficient number, in our experience, the people who are entering into that childcare premises, there's going to be lots of turnover in terms of the car parking, and there's an expectation it's probably more likely people will wait in their cars and wait for a car parking bay to become available rather than trying to exit that particular site and trying to find their way back into the community. We know as having children in the vehicle with you, it's unlikely you're going to reverse out and try and walk in when you know that there is this turnover of bays that's naturally occurring. And we do it in shopping centres, we do it when we go to uni, we do it in lots of other situations, waiting for school drop-off.
Sorry, just to follow up there. Councillor Robbins asked about the management of people waiting in cars. It's not really management of the parking, is it?
The city has, I'm sure Paul could probably, if he wants to chip in, probably provide some further details, but the city has, as part of its alternate recommendation, indicated that a parking management plan is required. We need to build on the existing parking management plan to put into place some measures which might address that matter. The city hasn't been specific about how they would like that to be achieved, whether it's having a person in the car park physically providing a stop-go type measure. I'm not too sure if that's what the city is intending.
So that might involve another staff member.
I can see that Paul has his hand up. Maybe he can.
That might involve another staff member.
Essentially.
Mr. Gantos, I'm happy for you to answer, but I want you to stick to the response to the specific question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I guess I wanted to set the context of the parking management plan. And just to be brief, respect your time, the parking management plans are a living management document, and it's always intended for all parking management plans that the efficacy of the measures are monitored, and sometimes over time there may be adjustments required. So the parking management plan does deal with allocation of parking on site, and it also deals with the time restrictions. But once the site is operating, then there's an expectation that there'll be a regular monitoring of those measures. And if it becomes apparent that some adjustments are required, that it's definitely expected that those adjustments be made. So we don't intend it to be set in stone, and we've even put that within the PNP itself. We've recommended as a minimum an annual review. But of course, if there's a situation that's significantly changed, then it would warrant an earlier review.
Then can I go to the length of stay? Where does the 7 minutes come from, and how is it?
Well, that comes from a traffic generation manual. So that the traffic generation manual, this one is an RTA manual, which is cited in the WAPC Transport Assessment Guidelines as a valid reference for traffic estimations. So in that manual, they estimated the traffic generation per student, and they also did a survey of the average length of stay. The average length of stay was, from memory, about 6.2 minutes. And so we just bump it up to an even 7 minutes to be conservative. So it came from a survey from a document.
Thank you.
Does that satisfy a more specific location such as this, where a vehicle has to enter a basement car park, get the child out, or maybe children out of the car? You've then got to go and take a lift to another level or go up steps. That seems to me that there is more more things they have to do to take up more time. Therefore, 7 minutes is going to be very, very tight.
Okay. We based it on that because it's based on data. Otherwise, we might not be objective in our assessment. Because if we're trying to gauge, I could measure the walking distance and then the walking speeds, but we prefer to use an objective source because it's less likely to be questioned. But otherwise, our assumptions would get questioned. But in that case, what we would expect is, as part of the monitoring of the parking management plan, if people are taking longer than 7 minutes, then the bays would be getting fuller, there'd be less turnover. So what we would do in response is reallocate some of the staff bays, like as was suggested, maybe make it 11 visitor bays. And if that's not enough, 12, because with staff you can get them to catch public transport or carpool. So there are management measures, or even have staggered start and finish times. So there are things you can do on that side, and that's what we would do if we found people are taking longer than average for childcare centres. Then we would increase the number of visitor bays. But I think we've got the total number of bays I think is sufficient on the site. It's just we might need to tweak the allocation, but that's part of the monitoring process of the parking management plan, and that's a very important component of the plan. I definitely think it does need to be monitored to make sure it's functioning effectively.
Thank you.
Is it reasonable then for a childcare centre to use its staff, and that they're very, very careful on the staffing ratios? Is it possible or reasonable to have a staff member monitoring car parking area, which is at another level?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think there was part of the conditions that the city was asking for what we would call a traffic warden to be looking at traffic flows. To me, I don't think it's necessary to have a traffic warden every single day there, morning and afternoon, because really, once the pattern's established, you might go out, might have someone check once a week what's happening in the car park. Is it okay? And also, you do get feedback from parents. I'm sure if they were having an issue accessing parking, they would also complain to the operators. So we're having problems getting a parking space. So there's that feedback loop from the users of the facility. And the monitoring, it doesn't have to be every single morning and afternoon. I think that's probably overkill, and there's no reason to need to do it that frequently, because the traffic pattern shouldn't change from day to day.
One more question. This is about the road capacity. Paul, you would have heard Mohammed's commentary around the capacity of the road, and he believes it's 1,000 vehicles per day and not 3,000. What are your comments around that?
Yeah, I would. There's different measures for road traffic volume. So there's a physical capacity of the road, and then there's desirable traffic volumes for the function. So physical capacity of a road, a standard traffic lane, you can have 800 cars in an hour driving down a traffic lane. That in terms of physical capacity, and which is way more than this development and the existing traffic. In terms of daily ideal capacities, desirable capacity for the function. So there's the main.
Sorry, you're breaking up there, Mr. Gantos.
Sorry, there's the main roads hierarchy has an ideal capacity of 3,000 vehicles per day, and the Transport Mohammed, he quoted 1,000 vehicles a day from livable neighborhoods, and that's it's called livable neighborhoods. It's focusing on the amenity when possible. But I do want to make quite an important point. Although I disagree with using livable neighborhoods, I still believe we're even complying with that, because if you're looking existing traffic is around 300 vehicles per day, and we're adding roughly another 300. So we're actually still way under the 1,000. We're below 700 vehicles per day. So even if we wanted to adopt Transport's advice to follow livable neighborhoods, I think it actually supports the proposal, because now we're saying we're under the 1,000 vehicles per day, which is an even more onerous threshold for maintaining amenity.
Thank you. Can I just,
yes.
do you have a follow-up?
Oh, no, I've got some.
You've got a
general
series of questions. Over to you, councillor.
No,
you go ahead.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Scarfoni. Look, I might stick with the parking if that's all right. We're following up on that. I like the idea that you're trying to get people off St Michael's Terrace into the underground car park, but I was led to believe there's not much turning space under there. So I can foresee cars coming off St Michael's Terrace, as you suggested, Mrs. Scarfone, waiting for a bay. But won't that, block the whole system up and make it an even more difficult parking management? And so that worries me a little bit. And then what I foresee is that parents say, well, I'm not going to go under there because I'll get stuck, and so I'm going to just park on St Michael's Terrace, which is going to aggrieve the. What are your comments on that?
There's two things. One is, are the physical dimensions enough for users to get in and out of those bays? And my understanding is that, yes, it's been designed to the Australian standards, so all of those bays can be accessed as they would in a standard development like this, and Paul could provide confirmation of that. The second issue that the city has raised is there a turnaround bay available if all of the other car parking bays are full at the time the person enters? So was that your question?
Yep.
And so that aspect is, we were just talking about then around the parking management side of things and ensuring that the parking bays are turning over enough to ensure that parents aren't having to wait a long time in order to find a bay, because they won't be expected to try and do a 3-point turn within that basement.
So can I just follow up on that? The intent is wonderful, but there will be situations, there absolutely will, where that parking is full. How do you see that being managed? To Councillor Barber's question, if a couple of extra cars drive down into that basement and it is full, how do you envisage that being managed, or how do you envisage that resolving itself?
Paul has prepared the parking management plan, so maybe.
Mr. Gantos, very brief response.
I'm happy to answer that. I think that concern applies to any childcare centre in the country. It doesn't matter how many bays you provide, there might be a chance on the odd occasion it's full, but we rely on the turnover of the bays. That's what we rely on, because when you come in, it might be full the moment you enter, but there'll be bays made available when vehicles exit. And this is a standard function of childcare centre car parks. I just don't see specifically why this childcare centre development might have more issues than other childcare centres.
Well, can I just jump in there? Because I'm
sure.
asking about the turnaround bay. So you've talked about other childcare centres operate the same. Do other childcare centres have turnaround bays?
Sometimes, and some of them don't. So I've worked on both. So we've used this same. So what we found is if there's a turnaround bay, it's probably more effective to use it for a drop-off bay, because that helps reduce the congestion in the car park. So if you sacrifice a drop-off bay for a turnaround bay, then all it's doing is people come in the car park, they turn around and then they leave. But then people might choose not to use it. They might choose to wait. Just because there's a turnaround bay doesn't mean people are going to use it. They might, because they're coming to pick up their child, they might say, well, I'll just wait till someone leaves and then park in their spot. So what we found is sometimes it's better to just have that space, use it as a drop-off, because then you're actually increasing the turnover and the capacity. So there's pros and cons for having the turnaround bay, but it's just something to note.
Sorry, can you explain to us what happens when a parent drives into that basement and it's full? How do they reverse out?
No, they would wait until someone exits. So there'd be someone getting into a car, same as if you go into a shopping centre aisle and you see someone getting into a car, you would put your indicator and you wait for that car to get out and you park in their spot.
Okay. And so I'm throwing these scenarios at you. I have a meeting at 9 o'clock and I don't have the luxury of waiting for a parent who's chatting to her friend upstairs in the foyer about a number of things that goes way beyond the 7 minutes. And I get impatient and I'm not prepared to wait. How do I get out of that basement? Do I reverse?
Well, I mean, in that scenario, if there would be a reversing, but we don't expect that to happen.
Okay.
Just because that's the purpose of our traffic modelling and analysis. So that's why we've done the analysis to see how many pickup drop-off bays we need. But if it turns out for whatever reason we need more, we would reallocate staff parking. So really the way we try to address this concern is we calculate what's the probability of this happening, of this specific scenario. And that's the analysis we've done. And we go for the design, we go with a 95th percentile. And the 95th percentile Q is 9 vehicles. That's the queuing analysis we've done, that 95% of the time in the peak hour, there's a maximum demand for 9 cars or less. And that's how many pickup drop-offs we're providing, and that's disregarding the ACROD, which then goes to 10.
Okay,
so
thank you.
that's the basis of our allocation, but we can, if in practice.
No, you've answered that question already. Thank you. We're going back over the same information again. So thank you for answering that. Back to you, Councillor Bumper.
Yes, thanks very much. So just back to Mr. Scarfone. And thank you. You mentioned that you did your work for the City of Melville, and I guess it's from that I'm quite surprised at the scale of this development in an R20 residential zone. And I would have thought that, being familiar with local planning policies, is that seemed incongruent to have such a large commercial, and this is a big commercial thing, which I think is where these parking problems are going to stem from. How can we justify such a large commercial entity in an R20 residential zone?
The local planning policy that the City of Melville has sets out a number of preferred locational characteristics for child, or it sets out some objectives for childcare centres. Then it sets out some preferred locational characteristics. It sets out some locational characteristics which are undesirable, and then goes on to provide some guidance around how the building should be designed, how the building should be designed, and how it should be managed by virtue of preventing things like noise and traffic issues that are occurring and parking issues. This proposal, it doesn't, by the way, provide a limit on the number of places that any childcare premises should have. And it doesn't say that an R20 locality is less preferable than an R60 or an R80 locality residential. So as a starting point of looking at this from, does it meet all of the locational characteristics, that desirable locational characteristics? And the answer to that is it meets all but one, which is this question around it being on a local road rather than a local distributor road. And my understanding, talking to Paul, is that both a local distributor and a local road are both in that lower order, that lower categorisation of roads. They're they're not your main streets. So I think there's certainly, and this site being located opposite a school with those existing on-street car parking on Queen's Road and the existing interface with the school means that as a local road, it's also servicing a broader catchment. So I think from an assessing officer perspective and an ex-Melville employee perspective, I see that local road desirable characteristic as being something that has been addressed as part of this documentation. There are it doesn't exhibit any of the undesirable characteristics. It's not located on a Canning Highway or any of those sorts of locations. And all of the siting and measures in terms of it being presenting in a residential manner are met. It meets the R codes for height, building setbacks, visual privacy, all of those sorts of things. It provides high quality fencing and landscaping. So it presents to the street, not in a big box shopping centre commercial development way, but in a manner that's quite consistent with a residential locality. So I think that the objectives are met.
Did you consult the position statement from the state government? It would have been going through a fairly rigorous thing while you were working at the city. Did that come into your calculations at all? Because they recommend that's where the numbers are recommended.
I don't know if anyone, at the time we did. I think we actually put in a submission on the childcare premises. There are some concerns with that in saying that larger childcare premises should only be located on public primary school reserves, for example, where in an inner urban area like this, primary schools certainly just simply don't have the space to accommodate a childcare premises. But that premise, that that policy does talk about trying to locate childcare premises in close proximity to existing schools and other infrastructure, which this does meet. And to the point, I know it was raised in a previous DAP meeting, but that policy doesn't hold any statutory weight. It isn't a policy, it's a position statement. And it's only to be used as a guidance where local government doesn't have an existing local planning policy. So the local government does have an existing local planning policy, and so that document really doesn't hold much weight.
Whether the state government would agree with you there, I think it's going to come into fruition in April.
Debating.
Sorry, not debating. Anything else? You said it's a vital community service. However, there are apparently 7 childcare facilities within 2 kilometres of this proposal. How can that be vital if the surrounding areas are well serviced?
Going back to that position statement, I think it says it very well. This is that childcare premises are vital and a very important community. They provide an important service for the community. And the demand for childcare is only expected to grow with population increase and changes to demographics. The information that Ray has in support of this is saying that yes, there are childcare premises in close by, but in terms of the raw numbers, there are more children in the Mount Pleasant area than there are available childcare spaces in Mount Pleasant. So, and that demand is only projected to grow.
Yeah, and interesting you brought up the position statement. Just one last question, if I may, Madam Chair. Just again, the scale. I don't understand the scale, and that was one of the key reasons for the deferral, and yet it wasn't embarked upon by the developer. And now the potential is that there's a lot of money to be made from childcare centres, and could it be seen to the local residents that you're being greedy and that you should have considered the amenity? Because I haven't heard you talk about amenity in those local planning policies. And this is what all the residents are here today concerned about, their local amenity, and you haven't mentioned that. And that is in the local planning policy to consider amenity. Why did the applicant not consider the amenity? Why did they not consider our suggestion or the DAP suggestion for deferral to reduce the scale and to, with the reduction in scale, enable access off Queen's Road? Why were these really important amenity things not considered by the applicant?
Can I just, because I'm mindful of time, you've already answered the question about the Queen's Road access, why you didn't do that. Can you just respond to Councillor Barber's question about what factor did amenity play in the design of the size of the centre? You've already dealt with the design of the building, but in terms of establishing the size of the centre, what amenity considerations did you take into account?
Put simply, that's probably a bad way of putting it. The proposal is supported by a whole range of technical documentation, which include traffic report, an acoustic report, parking management plan, road safety audit, which all demonstrate that this development will operate within the established parameters that are set out for that locality. In terms of things like noise impacts, those are managed by standard measures such as standard fencing and using the children's play area during normal operating times, minimising any amenity impacts that might have on the adjoining properties at that time. So if the traffic has been addressed in that the road network can accommodate the traffic and doesn't result in a level of traffic which goes beyond that local road network's desirable or capacity, then the traffic amenity impacts are met. The ongoing daily operations mean that the number of children and the way they're managed doesn't impact on the surrounding properties. And by reducing those numbers to 80 or 90 children, the children will still be playing in that area. There'll still be traffic on the road, but it doesn't reduce that doesn't have it doesn't increase the amenity. Those issues, those kids are still going to be there. I think the other thing that factors into the consideration is that this site is located next to an existing school. It already has the sound of children playing. It already has traffic going to and fro. So it is not situated deep in a residential locality where none of those ambient sounds and ambient activity is occurring. This is happening next to an existing activity location and doesn't introduce new amenity impacts.
Just, if you wouldn't mind, just while Mr. Scarpone's there, one of the local planning policy assessment elements was that vehicular access is via the secondary street, or should be by the secondary street, not the primary street. And I believe the primary street's St Michael's Terrace. So you said you complied to that assessment, but actually you don't, because the secondary access, vehicular access should be via the secondary street. So I found that an anomaly. And again, it's that whole argument about St Michael's Terrace being only 5.8 metres wide. Why didn't you make Queen's Road the primary street in that instance?
I would, the definition of what's the primary street, what's the secondary street. I suppose in this case, we've used the levels of the lands to ensure that the car parking is easily accessed from the lowest point, which reduces any need to dig into, reduces the amount of cut that's required to create that parking level, and enables a more level interface to the Queen's Road location. And it does then also allow for the retention of a couple of trees within that car parking, within the play area. The location of the buildings wrapping the outside edges of the north and west elevations allows then for car parking to be, for play areas to be located further from residents, closer to the schools, and therefore helps to protect the amenity of the adjoining landowners. So while there may be a case to be made that this is taken from the primary street, it's not a reason to warrant this being refused, and it hasn't been an issue that's been raised by the city in terms of any concerns from taking vehicle access from St Michael's.
Thank you.
Member Lafanti.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. You spoke today, and in the material we have need, and I'm interested in your comments about need and particularly weight to which we should be giving that. I note that there's been a number of SAT determinations about that effectively have said it's a matter that's pretty hard to define need, particularly when it's a commercial operator and not a specific, attached to very specific community detail and amenity, like being of a particular nature or in a particular location. Can you speak to weight that you say should be we should give consideration to on that aspect? And what attaches this particular proposal to those comments?
If I can understand your question, is it about the maximum number of children that proposed in this facility?
It's about the proposal says, the information I've got says that there's a need for childcare in this location at the scale you're talking about. I'm wanting to understand the weight that you are placing on that, or you're anticipating that we might place on it. And what I referred to was already SAT determination that has talked about how need is categorised and considered. So what do you say, one, weight we should place on it, and two, what are the specific uniqueness and you're probably familiar with the SAT cases that I'm referring to, that attributes need on this site.
I'll admit I'm not familiar with the SAT cases that you've referred to, but that's okay. The question on the total numbers has been something that's been raised because of the planning bulletin on childcare premises, which sets.
So I'm not so much the bulletin. I'm trying to get specifically. So what I'm drilling down into is the site specific, not the sort of generic of the bulletin, but the site specific that you've used to deal with the issue of scale and therefore need on this site. So you've obviously, your clients obviously come up with a judgment about need and scale. I'm trying to understand more specifically that, and I've qualified that because my reference to SAT determinations that essentially talked about the balancing and that effectively our commercial operators need is quite often difficult to objectively make judgment on. So I'm trying to understand what you're saying about need that we should be taking into consideration on this site specific, not the generic policy positions.
So, and it might be slightly different to what Member Lefanti's asking. To my mind, I'm asking, why do you feel that the demand and need and therefore the scale is a valid planning consideration in this case?
I don't know that I've specifically said that it is a valid planning consideration in this case. What we've said in our report is that the scale that is proposed has been designed in a way that is consistent with the residential nature of the surroundings, which is one of the objectives of the planning policy and one of the siting, one of the considerations in terms of siting. So is the scale of the development appropriate in built form context? And I would say yes, it is. It meets all the relevant built form criteria. And then a case of, well, is the scale appropriate in terms of the technical assessments that go alongside the built form context, car parking, traffic, and those that we've discussed. So the supporting technical documentation says that yes, this proposal is consistent with those the relevant Australian standards and other design criteria that those consultants work towards. So I'm saying, I guess, from a scale perspective, a built form scale, it's okay. From a technical compliance perspective, it meets those relevant matters, and therefore, as a whole, it doesn't introduce unexpected amenity concerns for the locality, and is therefore a suitable proposal.
So you're coming at that from an outcome perspective. The outcome is not an issue, but you are relying quite heavily in your justification on the need and demand for this number of places. And I guess that's what Member Lefanti's asking about is you've relied on that. So therefore, how much of that do we need to take into consideration and why should we? Or are you saying, well, it's part of your justification, but actually we should focus on the outcome and the impact of that? Are you saying that although you've relied on need as part of your justification, that's not what we should be focusing on? We should be focusing on outcome. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the outcomes on an outcomes-based assessment, this meets the relevant planning considerations. So focusing on the planning considerations which are applicable to this site and using appropriate level of discretion around the local access concern, local access street as a desirable characteristic, and some of the other issues around the siting. The overall outcome is acceptable. And if Ray said to me tomorrow, I want to build a 90-person childcare premises, the built form, and we'd still be talking about the outcome.
So
Still,
you've, I think you've covered that off in enough detail.
Follow up to that. 113 is a very odd number. So is that arrived at by saying, we've got this site, this size, I can build this much on it, staying within the planning framework, and then we calculate how many kids we can fit in? Is that how it's done?
There is a rough model that gets used, correct? So obviously if you need a certain amount of indoor space and a certain amount of outdoor space. It's actually probably more so the outdoor space, because you need greater outdoor space per child to accommodate certain numbers. And yes, and can I just pitch in on that last question? And I say respectfully to all the members, the only time need was ever raised, and this is not my first application that I've done it for childcare in the Perth suburbs, is queries from the from council officers, because that was raised by people that were opposing. Why does it have to be so big? What need do you have? We had to justify. We've been asked to justify the need. We've done the modelling. We've got the research that Mark has addressed in the information we've received. So it's not something we're putting forward that, you know, this is the basis of our application that we're building to because of the need. We want to make sure that our application meets the planning requirements, which we believe will have, and all other considerations for it being resided within a lovely neighbourhood, that it complements the neighbourhood rather than detracts from it. That's my non-planning cap view. So to answer your technical question.
You were maximising the site to get the biggest number of children you could.
We had the land. What could we do? Because obviously the land's very expensive and the built forms are very expensive. So we wanted to make sure that we could accommodate the numbers that we could.
Get back to you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go a little bit back to the parking activities. It's possibly for both parties. And my starting position is the material that we have. And I probably go over a little bit of what's already been raised. But in today's meeting, we've had a series of potential variations of parking, potential other options. My comment goes to what we actually have in front of us. The starting position that I have in front of me is that on-site parking for visitors is 9 bays. There isn't a turnaround bay dedicated to those. That parents can wait, and that the timeline is a 7-minute calculation to get in and out of the site. And that no parking, that there will be controls, management controls on the peak morning and peak evening. So in that context, my questions are, and again, I refer back to any planning, and you again would be familiar with those. What is the site-specific actions or considerations in its design that arrives at the acceptability of that parking number? You've got a design that requires parent to park, get upstairs and go out. I know we've heard today that it's a generic consideration, but on all of the planning material it says from generic we need to also factor in the specifics of the site, and just about every SAT decision talks about that very issue, goes, yep, there might be a generic, but what's specific in this design? So I suppose my question is, the extent to which we in making a decision can rely on the material that we've got as the first consideration, not what may happen 12 months. If it's not working, we'll change. That's not what we're being asked of today. We're specifically being asked of a design that has those characteristics that I've talked about. And I'm not actually hearing clearly, and you may have said it, but I've not taken it in, what is the specific site-specific justification. And I have some scepticism that one of those is a management control of staff to come down and coordinate parents during every peak hour. Like many people, I'm very familiar with childcare centres. I'd be very surprised that that would happen on a regular basis. But that is in fact what we're being asked of today, not what we were told that it's not going to happen every day. It specifically says in today's request. So can you speak, any one of the team, about the specific details that we're being asked to make a decision on in relation to that context?
Where to start? The siting of this childcare centre is very next to an existing school. The peak hour of the school has been identified as being with certain times, and the management plan that's been put in place, responding specifically to those characteristics, is to say only parents who are dropping off children that have kids, they're dropping off kids at the daycare, at the proposed facility, who also have children at Mount Pleasant Primary School, can drop off their kids within those certain hours.
So how does that practically work?
Whether that's, so we can get, I mean, I guess we'll potentially talk about practicality in a moment. We'll sort of ask a little bit about the specifics. So there's one specific measure that talks about the management of parking during that highly contentious time, which is the busiest time in the mornings and the afternoons. Lost my train of thought, sorry. Outside of those times, there is an expectation, again, a management expectation that those bays are used for 10 minutes, and those are set out in the management plan as well. And the number of visitor parking bays is developed on the basis of a mathematical formula that indicates that the 95th percentile, the peak demand will be 9 bays or less at any one time. So that means that the majority of the time, those 9 bays would be used at that very peak, or 9 or less would be used at that very peak. And there may be some instances where there are more car parking bays than are being provided. And that will need to be managed by parents and caregivers as they are using that facility during peak time. And people will need to, that will need to be communicated. So we're coming back to the initial skepticism and the initial comments around management of pickups and drop-offs during those specific peak times and with relation to primary school students. It is going to have to be something that is communicated to parents before they enrol their children to say, these are the times, if you don't have children at Mount Pleasant Primary School, these are the times you cannot pick up your kids. And that will be factored into people's decision-making processes around whether they want to go there. And I've used the analogy as you want to eat dinner at 6:30, but the restaurant's full. You can't eat dinner at that particular time, and someone will say you have to come earlier, you have to come later. So
just on that, before you move on of that particular issue, if a parent says, no, that I'm happy with that, I get it, and so on, but behaviourally, they just don't adhere to that, and they arrive when they shouldn't arrive. How are you going to enforce that? How will you enforce that? Is it each time it happens, you say to the parent, please don't do it again, and then it happens again, and they say, don't do it again, but in the meanwhile, there's all this stuff happening. How will you enforce those restrictions?
The parking management plan outlines some measures, and it would be something along those lines. So yes, there's posters available around, there's going to be promotional material to say these are the peak times, please don't drop off your children at that time. If it's noted as an issue that people are doing that, we would expect the future operators to speak to the parents and let them know that that isn't acceptable. And there may be some, I guess, difficult conversations to be had. If the city is concerned that the parking management plan isn't being appropriately enforced, they can also send out their planning compliance team and be there physically to watch how that is being enforced at any one time, and they can take measures to address that as they would for any other compliance concern that might be raised by the community.
In that same context, what do you say is the amenity impact and it's both amenity to neighbouring properties as well as traffic congestion in the street, relates to the peak hour movement to the centre, as well as what I've already talked about earlier in terms of the drop-off and pick-up protocol. So what, in the context of the proposal, I've narrowed down to a specific time period. So what do you say that is the amenity impact if people were to come more people to come to the site than required or stay longer? What I'm trying to get at is there's one thing about non-compliant and the management, but I'm now trying to move into the effect of that. And what do you say the impact in the peak hour? That's my first part of my question. And what do you say the impact is over the general operation of the centre? So can you separate out your comments to peak hour and other times that people might attend for drop-off and pick-up? In terms of, and I'm specifically talking about the impact of that location of car park, configuration of car park to the amenity of the surrounding residential area.
Understand correctly, peak hour, you're talking about peak hour for school pick up and drop off?
The peak hour that you've identified in here. So you've identified in your material that there is, from my read of it, that there is a potential challenge, congestion challenge, a movement challenge for the street and access to the site during peak hours, hence the protocols. So my first part of that question is, what is the consequence that you say are the impact during the congestion period? So if these protocols are not adhered to, what is the consequence? And you might be traffic that can speak to it. What are the consequences in terms of impact?
I'm happy to speak to that if I may. So when we look at the parking management plan and the time restrictions, when we refer to the peak period, we're only referring to the peak period for the primary school drop-offs and pickups. It's not really, there's no concern in terms of a general peak traffic period on St. Michael Terrace. So I've just got the traffic data for St. Michael Terrace in front of me, and outside of those school times, the traffic's quite low. So you probably can stand on the side of the road for 3 minutes and then just see one car go past. So I'm seeing traffic like between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. It's an average of 23 cars for the whole hour, which is about one car every 3 minutes. So there's not a huge volume of traffic. It's a very quiet road. So we're not really expecting any congestion or conflict with general traffic on St. Michael Terrace. And really this management plan is just concerned with that intense school pickup in the afternoon, which although there's congestion, it's quite typical around schools. And we've just tried to address that conflict with the school traffic, but there isn't any other peak on the road at this time. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I'm trying to understand the what you say, the impact, which is what we're talking about at the moment, the scale and intensity of the development, and what that ultimately means in terms of both appropriateness of site, which is measured in things like amenity impacts, noise, traffic congestion, those kind of elements, traffic movement. And we focused a lot of today on just a specific period, and I'm trying to separate the two, the peak period, what the impact is, and the remainder of the operational time that's been requested as part of this proposal.
Yeah, so if we look at the daily traffic, I think we can probably go back to Mohammed's comments about livable neighbourhoods and 1,000 vehicles per day target, by desirable target, and we're still well under that. So in terms of just general day-to-day traffic, people might experience. We're under 1,000 vehicles per day, and just a spread for general traffic spread across the whole day of operation. So under 1,000 vehicles per day is still quite low. It's below the desirable minimum for access roads, and it's also below the amenity volume of 1,000 vehicles per day.
Thank you. Just a couple more from me and then we'll move to the report. So this panel previously expressed some concern about the waste collection arrangements. And it seems that the change you've made is to go away and negotiate with the city that their waste contractor would negotiate off-peak pickup times with the waste contractor. Is that the only change you've made to the waste collection requirements? And can you remind me why you can't accommodate on-site collection with a smaller private contractor vehicle?
Did you want me to speak to that? Yeah, so the other change we made with the waste is we're not presenting the bins on the footpath anymore. So that was one of the issues raised in the previous DAB, that there was a concern presenting on the footpath would block the footpath for school students. So what we're doing is a off-peak in the middle of the day, the truck parks and the bin store is located within 15 meters of the waste truck. So the bins are just wheeled straight to the back of the truck, emptied and wheeled back. And that's appropriate for that street type and the traffic volumes on the road and the number of bins. So that's the process we've done, and we did consult with the city to confirm that they get approval from their waste department.
Right.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can I just have a follow-up to that question? Yeah. Can I ask who takes the bins to the truck? Is it the truck driver or the employees?
It's the waste contractor, so they would have someone in the truck with them. Because for rear loader waste trucks, you always have to move the bin to the back of the truck, no matter where the bins are presented. So you do need a truck driver and you need someone. It can't be the childcare staff or OHS. The waste contractor wouldn't let people wheel bins to the back of the truck. It would have to be done by the contractor.
Thank you. I note that you're now proposing to retain a tree within the play area. One of the submitters earlier suggested that more work should have been done on a design that retains more or all significant trees on the site, including the rose gum. Is that possible?
Focus of our conversations very early on when the concept plans were being prepared, and there wasn't an ability to retain any additional trees other than
with the current design, right? Was there the possibility of redesigning the centre to accommodate that, or would that have then caused some of the amenity impacts on the neighbours that you talked about earlier? You'd have to flip it.
It did cause a significant redesign, which potentially then introduces new impacts for the adjoining landowners.
Okay, last question. And it's a minor one out of interest. There appears to be a gate shown at the intersection, at the corner of the property at the intersection of the two streets. What is the purpose of that gate?
Do you have the plans?
It's the first plan on your, it's the first plan of your set. So if you go into if you're in the agenda, if you just go to the development plans, it's the very first, it's actually the coloured one. It shows the entrance into the play area at the corner.
Today is the moment to give me.
That's all right, in the context of all the big issues.
Max, yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Sorry, a second. Sorry, that's it is shown as an entrance. I suspect that the majority of people are going to be going through those main doors, as you can see. I don't think anyone's going.
Okay.
If we need that to be deleted from the.
Okay, that's all good. Thank you. That's all good. Thank you. We are now going to move to questions of our local government officers, and we have them online with us. We have Kate Bainbridge, Josh Caracciolo, and Kimberly Brossel with us. Who else do we have in the room there?
Sorry. Yes, we can hear everyone. We're available for any questions. Thank you.
The other person in the room is Ashish. He's our traffic road safety coordinator.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members, do you have questions of our local government officers?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and questions through you. Firstly, just to help me out a little bit, because I'm not a planner, I'm just wondering if you can explain on page 14 how the design principles are met with regards to clause 3 of LPP 3.1, fences and street walls. So the deemed to comply seems to be 2 metres above natural ground level, and the proposal seems to be 3.6 metres. I'm just wondering if you can explain a little bit more, and maybe in a bit more layperson's terms than what is in the report, how the design principles are met.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Councillor Robbins. So the design principles talks about fences being low and enabling passive surveillance out onto the street and vice versa. And so the applicant has lowered the solid sections of the fence from the original plans and replaced it with visually permeable paneling and perspex, so that will enable a view to the street and vice versa, and reduce the bulk onto the street.
And just to add to that, the fencing also accommodates a portion of retaining to provide a level play space for the safety of children playing in the outdoor spaces. So they've tried to incorporate the retaining as well as the permeable fencing in the one sort of holistic design as the property does slope as it goes down towards the down the street. So yeah, there's a portion of retaining incorporated into the fence.
Thank you. Just have a question about the traffic impact statement. So it says in the report, the applicant has not provided evidence of benchmarking or first principle approach as part of the TIS. The applicant is therefore required to do a benchmarking or first principle approach for trip generation to be calculated appropriately. But then I note that there's no condition in the alternate recommendation to require an updated traffic impact statement. So could you please comment on that?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Based on the guide to traffic impact assessment, childcare centres, the survey or the numbers, the traffic generated are for 90 children. So as this development has more than 90 children, around 113 children, the traffic impact guide states that they need to use a benchmarking or a first principle approach, which is recommended. That is where we commented, stating that a benchmark or a first
principle is required for the updated traffic generation numbers.
Thank you. And just to add to that, through the chair, in relation to conditioning an updated traffic impact statement, we believe that to be a little bit inappropriate as a condition of development approval. Our recommendation is for refusal on the basis that we believe it to be inappropriate in this particular location at this scale. And hence, conditioning a traffic impact statement which would go into that level of detail as to benchmarking against other larger centres to determine the appropriateness of the pickups and also the traffic generation. What if the outcome is that it's a larger number that need more car parking? The implications of that could be subsequent conditions being required, and hence it's not necessarily appropriate to condition an updated traffic impact statement. Instead, if that was to be addressed, it should have been through addressed in the deferral recommendation initially.
Can I just follow up with that? Thanks, Kate. So the comment in the report that says the applicant is therefore required to do this benchmarking or first principle approach, I'm a bit confused by what you just said, because you said that if the item was to be deferred, you would ask for that, but the recommendation isn't for deferral, it's for refusal. So when would this request of benchmarking come in?
Thank you, through the chair. We requested as part of the initial application to reduce the scale of the centre, and so our expectation was to see a reduction in the scale of centre, and hence the traffic impact statement amended and updated to reflect the reduced scale. So because of the applicant instead elected to justify accordingly and keep the existing scale of centre, we're unable to make that initial, request as part of the deferral recommendation, because our deferral recommendation was to seek a reduction in the scale of centre.
Other questions of the officers? Councillor Barbara?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, city officers. So you're recommending a refusal for this development. However, the applicant seems to think they have met most of the assessment criteria based on the local planning policies, and even quoted the position statement. So just in summary, your key reasons for the refusal, even though the applicant seems to think they've met most of the assessment criteria?
Thank you, Councillor Barbara, and through the chair. Fundamentally, childcare centre is a commercial land use and it's proposed in a low density residential area. Land uses are required to be compatible and complementary to the zoning that it sits within. This is a very large centre that we believe you typically see in a commercial zone, or at least on a busier road, which have a different amenity expectation. You're looking at a ratio potentially of a maximum number of children to staff, and due to the scale of the centre, you're looking at drop-off pickup time requiring a significant amount of management. You're heavily reliant on management measures, which we believe can be difficult to enforce and can easily erode over time. There's a risk of queuing in the road during peak times without management measures being in place at all times. The width of the road is slightly under the ideal of 7.2 at 6 metres, and therefore there's an increased likelihood of on-street parking being less safe in this location. It's fundamentally inappropriate now, belief to condition or manage your way out of an incompatible land use. Your noise and traffic compliance with other legislation and standards does not remove the need to consider the local amenity context. This is centres on the local roads, not higher order roads, and then therefore there's a different amenity expectation. So we see that this site does have merit for a smaller scale centre, which would be more compatible with the zoning and local context of the amenity, but at this scale, the risk is quite substantial to impact negatively on the amenity of the area.
Thank you, Kate. That's a good summary of what's in the report.
And just, sorry, thank you. And just to follow up, if I may, we've heard the waste management has been updated. Was there an extra cost for the city's waste management people collecting the bins? Do you know?
Sorry.
Added to the rates.
Thank you through the chair. I believe that there's additional costs that can be charged through the rates, and there's also the option for the applicants to go through a private collection arrangement. So the option is there for them to utilise the city service or to use a private collection arrangement.
Yeah, just before I come back to you, Councillor Barber, can I just check on the waste management contract and arrangements, how much control does the city have over the reliability of the contractors' pickup times? So we're relying now with this new waste management methodology that the contractor will pick up waste in a specific window, and you agree that with your contractor, but how much control do you have that actually occurs every day?
So thank you for your question. So the waste management plan was reviewed by the coordinator of waste, and they've advised that they can accommodate those requirements of picking up 3 times a week. I think it's 10 or 12 bins 3 times a week with their contractors collecting the bins from the compound, emptying them, and then putting the bins back into the compound. So that's that was confirmed by our waste management team.
There is also a larger window in the middle of the day between the peak periods. So there's a bit of flexibility in the sort of time in which it can be collected to avoid the peak periods.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Barber.
I think I'm finished. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The report talks about traffic congestion and concerns regarding traffic, and that's been discussed in a reasonable amount today. And my questions are really trying to drill down on the overall proposal, and it appears to be in two sections. One appears to be during peak school period, pick up and drop off, and the other seems to be operation of the centre outside of that. Can you clarify for me that the other concerns in the report, they seem to be predominantly focused on the crossover of time frame, so the peak period between the two operations, this proposal and the school. Could you separate those out for me in terms of impacts and the concerns that you're raising? Because it appears to me, as I've already said, that much of today's conversation, as well as the material we have, seems to focus on that window.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So basically, as we discussed, the straight St. Michael Terrace can accommodate approximately 3,000 vehicles a day. And if you take the 10% of that to be 300 as a local access C street, then outside of the peak hours, the volumes that this development generates, added on the existing traffic volumes, the street can accommodate.
So street accommodating is one marker. I suppose I'm trying to get to accommodating. What is the amenity impact to the residents? That's been raised a lot in the material of this proposal at this scale outside of those peak periods. Are you saying there is no impact? Because that's sort of how I'm reading the RA.
Thank you through the chair. It is more of a planning amenity consideration. You're looking
at it is correct.
You're looking at a doubling of the traffic flow, traffic numbers that would be accommodated on that particular road in a very low density area as R20. And so based on that sort of, I guess, those numbers, it is quite a substantial change. And that's sort of the reason why we typically, as part of the city's established position in our local planning policy, don't really want to see childcare centres on local roads, is because of that, you know, substantial change in local traffic numbers that you would experience in those peak periods. So having them on a local distributor road, where you would typically see a lot more of that peak movement and a lot more of that that traffic flow, has a different amenity experience and amenity outcome for those residents, and so there's a different expectation, and so that's why those centres are generally childcare centres are a little bit more appropriate on those local distributor roads. So when you have a really large centre on these really low like local roads, which you typically don't see those peaks and troughs in the peak morning and the evening, there can be quite substantial shift in the amenity expectation and outcome. So that's why we generally like to see these centres on those local distributor roads, which have been designed to accommodate and do experience higher volumes of traffic.
So you talked a sort of generic, the doubling of the traffic flow. Are you saying that is a direct correlation to amenity impact? Are we referring to St Michael's Terrace or Queen Street? Were you referring to then? Because they're quite different environments from the material we have, and also being on site. So you talked about doubling of traffic. I assume you mean in St Michael's Terrace, and that being inconsistent or not similar to a low density residential. My question is, so what is the amenity impact of that additional vehicles? It is a grid pattern layout of the land. It's not a cul-de-sac. It's not a one-way movement on St Michael's Terrace, and it grid patterns pretty much in the whole area. So I'm still trying to get some clarity around the impact of that, the amenity impact, whether it be noise or otherwise, congestion or otherwise, to the residents outside of the peak period. And my notes were more that it was a doubling of numbers, but I couldn't quite get what does that mean in an amenity or a planning impact.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. That just in relation to the comment about the peak, that yes, the doubling of the numbers is something that would be generally seen only during the peak periods in the morning and the afternoon. So it is fair to say that the amenity impacts from a traffic perspective will be limited during those times. However, you still have to also consider the noise impact from a childcare centre, although it does meet the noise regulations, as is entrenched in planning decision making. Just meeting the noise regulation does not remove the need to consider the local amenity impact from an increase in commercial activity in a residential area. So whilst the centre is in operation in the middle of the day, there's also a noise consideration and amenity impact from the centre operating in the middle of the day.
In this particular proposal, the design incorporates the outdoor play area primarily to the intersection of the two roads, and it limits the outdoor play area to the adjoining abutting residential properties. Could you speak a little bit further about the sort of noise impacts that you're concerned with? Whereabouts are those your sort of primary concerns?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not professed to be an acoustic expert, but we're looking at a quite substantial scale of centre. In the sense we will see, quite substantial use of the outdoor spaces, and we also will see during the drop-off and pick-up times noise impact from people coming and going. So ultimately, there's a residential interface on two sides. One side is a little bit more protected than the other, but fundamentally, it's I wish to distinguish that there's the noise regulation compliance, which we understand it meets, this centre will meet, but there's also the ongoing management and use that needs to be considered in this context. So there is sort of some residential properties nearby that will be impacted by the centre, and will require that the centre is constantly monitored and managed in accordance with the noise management of the acoustic report, sorry.
Thank you. That's at the moment probably all I've got just at the moment.
All right. I think we have asked and answered everything we need to make this decision.
Confirm that that is an emergency access.
No, we're done. Thank you. We're going to move to the report now. We have a report in front of us that recommends refusal of this application for a number of reasons. I will be seeking a mover and a seconder for that. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Barber, do I have a seconder? Councillor Robbins. Councillor Barber, as mover, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. I support the removal of this recommendation. This is a large-scale commercial centre which is inconsistent and possibly non-compliant with local planning policies. The area is well resourced in terms of childcare centres, and so this is not a vital or needed large-scale operation. The applicant made little to no effort to work on the suggestions regarding bulk and scale impacts to the community as outlined from the deferral by the members. There have been precedents set in South Perth and Mount Claremont where lesser bulk childcare centres were not accepted for the various reasons that we've spoken about today. And I don't want to see us set a precedent in this R20 zoned quiet residential area that we accept such a large scale development. The parking plan is not viable nor manageable, in my opinion. With a redesign, with a much smaller scale, with access via Queen's Road, with a better parking plan, with potentially the redesign keeping more significant trees, then this is possibly a potential small scale amenity considering development, but the present plan is not, and therefore I urge you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Barber. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we have here is a proposal for a large childcare centre in a quiet residential R20 area. It's not on a main road. It proposes 113 children and 28 employees at any one time, which will have a significant impact on the surrounding area. And as we've heard today, largely those impacts will be traffic and noise. The use is incompatible with adjoining residential properties and has the potential to impact the everyday use of neighbouring properties due to the intensity of the land use being likely to create traffic volumes and noise impacts which are inconsistent with the low density residential character of the area. The hours of operation being 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m, whilst I know probably not an issue in itself, just being that centre being located directly adjacent to residents will add to the impact that it will have on their quality of life. It would be, I think, different if it was just 9 to 5, but it's not. It's there from the moment the residents are waking up in the morning until they're getting home and settling down for the evening, preparing dinner, that sort of thing. I always, in considering development applications, I always like to sort of look through it with the lens of like, should the residents have known that this could eventuate right next to them? And I think in this case, the answer is no. I know when I bought my home, I went to see what the zoning was around the local area, and being R20 right in the middle of a suburb near no major roads, I think that, you know, most people would assume that there's not going to be a development right next door that's going to have a large impact on their lives. And so I think in this case, the residents should be able to assume that they're not going to have something like this pop up right next door to them. In terms of some of what we talked about today, I think limiting the drop-off during certain times to particular families is probably not workable. I know from my own experience of dropping kids at daycare, you can't say that you can't come during, this 20-minute period. It's just really hard to manage that when you've got to get to work or got to get to a meeting. The traffic impact statement, I think there's still issues that have been unaddressed from the questions that I raised earlier. I think that the objectives of a residential zone state that a non-residential use must be compatible with the residential uses. And in itself, I think that a childcare centre can be compatible, but I just think the size and scale of this one makes it incompatible. I think that there's some sufficient concern and confusion around the car park situation and how that would work in terms of the visitor bays and reversing, and whether there's an opportunity to reverse. And I'm not satisfied that that can be addressed from the questions that were asked and the answers that the applicant provided. I don't think that that can be satisfactorily addressed through a condition. There's varying views in the room around the need for a childcare centre in this location, but I think that indicates that a suitable compromise would have been a smaller centre with a capacity for less children. And just also picking up on the question asked by the chair earlier about retention of an existing tree, perhaps a smaller centre would have allowed for that tree to be retained. So for all of those reasons, I'm not supportive of approving this development. I'm supportive of the recommendation for refusal. Leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Other members speak for or against?
Thank you, Madam Chair. By any measure, this is a good site for a childcare centre, right opposite the school, where parents can do the one-stop shop. They've got kids at a childcare centre and at the school. However, I agree with the comments that have been made. This is a very large centre, and I think it's a pity that the applicants didn't take heed with the previous DAP meeting, where there were comments around to look at they look at the potential for reducing the size. I agree with the comments made around the parking. I think the 7-minute window, while it's a calculation done through some magic formula, I don't think in this situation it's a workable or an appropriate time, given you have the car park at one level, you've got to take a lift up, and hydraulic lifts are notoriously slow, and you might not be there, it might be up there, and you've got to wait for it to come down. I just don't think a 7-minute window is a workable time frame. What really worries me, I suppose, is the amenity impact on the residents in or passing by in St Michael's Terrace. The frontage to St Michael's Terrace is very commercial-like. There's a wall for the bin store. There's a 6.6 metre driveway. There's a wall to the lift and lobby. There's some stairs. There's a wall and a ramp going up, and then there's a retaining wall next to that. So it's presenting a very commercial, non-residential frontage to the street. So I'm very concerned about that. And I think that's, for that reason, I would like to add another reason to the motion, if I can make an amendment. Let me read that out for you. It'd be,
before we think a second.
Okay. It'd be reading D. The scale, so it follows on for the following reasons. D, the scale of the use and operations has consequential knock-on impacts, particularly in St Michael Terrace, including but not limited to the waste collection, the entry and exit of vehicles, and the presentation to the street in terms of design and residential character.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Mr. Robbins, do you wish to speak further to that amendment?
Yes, as I said before, I think That is not a frontage that you would like to see in the street, particularly if you're opposite that. The waste collection will occur. Once you've got all the kids there and it's quietened down from a point of view of children being delivered there or picked up. In between that, you've got the waste collection several times a week. You've got maintenance vehicles coming during the week or delivery vehicles during the week. So there's still a lot more activity that occurs there, which takes away that residential character. And we've heard that the street is quite narrow. I have been out there. It's be very tight when all the school or the parents are parking there. So I just think that there is insufficient attempt to address the residential character of the street.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. No further comments. Thank you. But does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment? I will speak very briefly. I don't necessarily have a concern about the size of the build form. I think the proposal does tick the technical planning boxes in terms of build form, design, quality, landscape, visual privacy, signage, fencing, most other requirements of the city's local planning policy. But I will support the amendment because I do pick up on the other aspects that you've raised in terms of the activity-based impacts on that frontage. So not necessarily the aesthetics of the build form, I don't have a concern about that, but the fact that certain activities need to occur to service the centre that then have impacts, I'm prepared to support it on that basis. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the amendment? Member Lafanti.
I'm speaking against the amendment. From my perspective, my view is that the site has some opportunities based on its site levels, and it reads primarily from St Michael's Terrace as residential in its design, with the interactive activities in terms of noise facing in towards the school. I note the comment relating to in movement and the signage that is on that location, but from the material I have in front of me, don't think it's excessive. And note that the city, through the material we have, is dealing and controlling the management of things like waste, and that they're proposed to occur essentially during the day when for the vast majority of time you would expect activities of that to occur, so not in sensitive times such as pre-morning or late in the evening. And so from my perspective, they're screened with direct opportunity for the operator to go and collect the bins, etc., therefore not leaving them on the street. From my perspective, I don't agree with this particular amendment, but I can speak further on overall proposal. But in this particular case, I don't support the amendment.
Thank you. Higham, do you wish to close on the amendment?
Just to reiterate, I suppose, that at street level, this appears commercial. It's the next level up where there is some attempt to make it look like a residential building, but it's at street level, at pedestrian level. It's those walls and gaps that concern me, in addition, obviously, to the activities that occur during the day. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to put this amendment to the vote. The amendment is to add an additional reason for refusal to the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried 4-1. Further? Speak to the substantive.
Essentially, I am speaking against the overall substantive. I note the concerns and comments relating to the scale of the development, and whilst there are some changes, particularly in relation to the parking configuration that I am of the view need to be addressed, I'm not of the view that the overall development is so inappropriately located. When we talk about scale of development and the associated considerations that have been given, the community have very loud and clearly said there is a parking problem. They've all cited the parking issues associated with the school And so for me, I separate out the school and the school responsibility and other agencies for school parking. And I don't hold the view that the applicant of this development is responsible for the parking associated with the existing congestion. They are responsible for what they add and contribute to it. So from my perspective, that's why I say there are some comments that I have in relation to specifically the parking, and I've already spoken during the meeting on that. But in terms of its configuration and design, its locational context, Queen Street definitely has a different dynamic. It links into Reynolds, has commercial further down. It's directly opposite a school. The commentary and the SAT appeals that I have also been referring to talk very clearly about not blindly applying a set of provisions and actually looking at its locational context and what's around it. This design, in my view, has pushed the open area, the noise area towards the corner, and has incorporated both in its design and its materials into St Michael's treatments that create the connection into the residential area. I acknowledge that it is a reasonably large facility, but there are some characteristics about this that are already in place that, in my view, I am attempting to separate out those elements and the proposal in front of us. And so, as I say, I don't support the recommendation for refusal. I have some comments that I would make should an alternate get on the table about obviously my comments around on-site parking. But overall, I think there is a merit in this proposal in this location.
Thank you, Member Fanti. Look, my view is I think the deferral reasons previously provided by this panel haven't all been addressed to the extent that would give me comfort to support the proposal. So because we defer for a number of reasons doesn't mean they all need to be ticked before they come back. But just from my perspective, I don't feel I have enough comfort, so I will support the recommendation for refusal. I've read and I've heard all the arguments put forward by the residents and the applicant team, and I do think the proposal has some planning merit. But my key concerns, and I'll run through these in a minute, outweigh the positive attributes of the proposal. I don't necessarily support or agree with all the concerns that have been raised. I don't necessarily have a concern about the design and size of the built form. Like I said before, I think the proposed design ticks the technical boxes in terms of built form, design quality, landscaping, visual privacy, signage, fencing, and most other requirements of the city's local planning policies. I don't necessarily have a concern about the centre simply because it doesn't align with locational suggestions, and that's what they are. They're just suggestions in the WAPC's draft position statement on childcare premises, and therefore the objectives of the city's local planning policy 1.12. These are due regard guiding documents, and I'm usually disinclined to make a considered planning decision simply on the basis that it does or doesn't tick the boxes of such a guiding document. We need to apply our minds more than that. I also don't necessarily have a concern about noise as a valid planning consideration. The centre will need to comply with the noise regulations, and the modelling provided shows that it's able to. The centre has been designed to locate play areas away from immediate neighbours and to face the streets. Also, the site is across the road from a school with its own child and vehicle noise, and we would struggle, I believe, to make a reasonable argument that the noise that would be generated by a centre with 113 children would cause significantly greater amenity impacts in terms of noise than a more modest centre. So I guess what I'm saying, whether there's 80 children or 113, I don't think noise is the deciding factor there. And from my perspective, issues raised of demand, need, oversupply is not an issue that we should be reasonably considering. My key concerns centre around traffic congestion, not numbers on streets, but the congestion, the adequacy and functionality of on-site parking. I still have reservations about waste collection and potential conflicts between vehicles entering the site and young users of the adjacent footpath. Even prior to reading Transcore's deputation, I had questions and doubts about anticipated drop-off and pick-up times. Admittedly, it was a long time ago, and I would suggest a lot longer ago than Councillor Robbins. But I recall those drop-offs, and leaving in 7 minutes, even in my rush to get to work, would have been a really, really good day. Those dwell times have been used as an assumption for the number of visitor bays that would be needed. And I understand that that bay is based on something, as per Mr. Gantos's responses, that you can tie an explanation to. But I agree with the city and the community that I don't think there are enough bays on site, given the particular circumstances of this location. Specifically competition, there's existing competition for on-street parking at peak times, and I would suggest that those peak times are the same or similar for the proposed centre and the school across the road. I note the applicants' attempt to address this issue via the parking management plan and the proposed restrictions on dropping off and picking up during peak school hours. But I don't think those restrictions would be effective, and I don't think they're realistic, because they're likely to be highly unpopular with and disregarded by busy carers. And I think it would be difficult for both the centre and the city to enforce. If such restrictions exist, and or the centre parking is known to be in high demand and regularly fully occupied, carers might be disinclined to take the time and go to the trouble of driving into the basement to check if a bay is available, only to have to remove themselves with or without a turning bay and find somewhere else to park if there is none. Instead, they're likely to grab the nearest on-street bay or wait in the road, waiting for a bay to open, which has the potential to cause further congestion and safety issues, especially at peak times. I've also previously expressed a concern, and still hold that, about potential conflict between vehicles entering or leaving the basement parking and children using the footpath to walk and ride to school. This is unlikely to be a significant issue outside of peak times, but I'm concerned that during the activity and the distractions afforded by peak hour, someone could get seriously hurt. And I'm disappointed that this issue wasn't able to be resolved through redesign of the centre and relocation of the access point. I take the applicant's comments that were made about potential amenity impacts on the one adjoining owner. I still hold the view that could have been ameliorated. I'm not sure that the whole centre would need to be redesigned to address a different access point. And I maintain my concern about the waste management methodology. So even if there's agreement that bins will be collected in off-peak periods, I'm not convinced this will always occur. And if there are cases where bins are collected at busier times, I have concerns about potential amenity and safety impacts as a result. So for those reasons, I will be supporting the recommendation for refusal. With that, I will revert back to the mover. Councillor Barber, do you wish to close?
Yes, I'll just quickly close. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the comments from the panel members. I take on board your comments about the positive design elements of the proposal, and I agree with you. However, I too am disappointed that other design elements weren't incorporated after our suggestions due to the deferral. It is important to note that it is a local road, St Michael's Terrace, with a category of a D access, and I don't think that this road is large enough to support such a large commercial development. I agree with the panel members that the parking plan is currently not manageable and potentially quite unviable. I take on board the panel members' comment that the school parking is a concern in itself. However, as a panel, I think we need to be really mindful of the safety of the particularly school children who use the area, and I think that their safety would be compromised severely with this development to go ahead in its current form. The footpath on St Michael's Terrace is also a concern, and with the access as it currently stands and with the waste management questions, I feel that this design element is also a major concern in this proposal. So for that, quickly sum up reasons and noticing that safety in this particular proposal is paramount, I ask you to support the refusal for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. We will now vote on the recommendation as amended. All those in favour? Against? 4-1. Moving to item 4, Form 2 DAP applications. There are nil for Melville today. Item 5, Section 31 SAT reconsiderations. The other business for our meeting today, all SAT applications for the DAPs are listed on our website. With that, I close the meeting at 1:07 p.m. Thank all panel members for your involvement and attendance, and for the members of the public and the team for attending today. And I thank the Secretariat as usual for all the support for a very long meeting. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.